Good afternoon, everyone. Please be seated. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for attending the first meeting of the full council in our new City Hall. I hope you're all sitting comfortably, so we'll begin. Please note that the meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel, and I welcome members of the press and public who may be viewing this meeting remotely. We move into the formal business of the meeting, the notice to convene the meeting. Can we take the notice convening the meeting as read?
Agreed.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Mr Mayor, we have apologies from Councillors Blackburn, Bernicle, Dodds, D. McKnight, Taylor, Wilson and Alderman Forbes, Tate and Arnott.
Are there any further apologies from the floor? Councillor Hudson.
Colin Nicholson and
Councillor McKnight. No more? Thank you. The next item is the minutes of the last ordinary meeting of the Council. Now, this was the one that was held on the 17th of November 2021. Can we agree with those minutes? Do any members have any interest to declare? Councillor McKnight. Yes. Any more? Can I remind members that they are requested to wear face coverings during the meeting, unless of course medically exempt, and they should only be removed when speaking via the microphones provided. I'd like to thank those members who have given notice of their wish to speak. Where notice has been given to speak, the members will be invited to speak at the appropriate time. If any member who hasn't given prior notice wishes to speak at any point during the meeting, they should please raise their hands to indicate and speak when invited to do so. It would of course be of assistance if you could state your name. I would request that members endeavour to conclude the business on the agenda within the allotted 3-hour period. No arrangements have been made for the meeting to reconvene tomorrow. Sufficiently debated, I may restrict the number of speakers in order to try and get the business of the meeting concluded in one sitting. Now, members, it is with great sadness that I inform Council of the death of former Councillor John Walton. John passed away on the 6th of January in Sunderland Royal Hospital, aged 93. His funeral will be held at Sunderland Crematorium on the 4th of February. John was first elected as a councillor in May 1999 and served on the council until May 2012. He represented the Fulwell ward. He was a member of a number of committees over the years, including the Regulatory Committee, Licensing Committee, Development Control, Hetton, Houghton and Washington, Development Control North Sunderland and Planning and Highways Committee. He also served on the North Sunderland Area Committee and the North Sunderland Local Board, the Personnel Committee, Appeals Committee and Grading Appeals Committee. John was a member of the Scrutiny Committee, the Policy and Coordinating Review, the Community and Safer City Scrutiny Committee and Culture and Leisure Review Committee, as well as the Education Complaints Panel, the Education, Appointment of Governors, members of Development Subcommittee and Adult Social Care. John was also a school governor for Hilton Primary School for a 4-year period and represented the Council on the Tyne and Weir Joint Museum Committee and the Joint Committees for the North East of England's Open Air Museum at Beamish. Can you please join me in sending condolences to the family and friends of former Councillor John Walton at this sad time? And I ask you all to observe a minute's silence as a mark of respect. Thank you very much, colleagues. I understand, Councillor Kevin Johnson, you have an award to present to the Council. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm absolutely delighted that the housing team have been recognised nationally for successful pre-eviction support service. The team have been highly commended at this year's Inside Housing UK Housing Awards within the Homelessness Project of the Year category. The service, launched in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, ensured that our residents who face financial difficulties at the times of eviction were supported alongside landlords to help them stay in their homes. The service supported more than 130 residents in the private sector and offered tailored advice and assessments to both landlords and residents to discuss alternatives to eviction. This is a fantastic achievement in recognition of the team and all the hard work they have done and do to help our residents in the most difficult times and circumstances. I am proud to present this certificate confirming such a fantastic achievement, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor. That concludes my announcements. I would now like to invite the Leader to provide an update to the Council on the situation with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, Leader.
And thank you, Mr Mayor, for the opportunity again this afternoon to provide an update to Council on the COVID-19 pandemic. When I last provided an update in November, we were yet to see the full impact of the Omicron variant, and I'd like to begin by paying tribute to the phenomenal efforts, once again by residents, volunteers, businesses, public sector organisations and service providers to keep the city running. As with previous surges in infection rates, which, although starting to come down within the region and nationally, have been at the highest levels seen at any time during the pandemic, our NHS and care sector heroes in particular are continuing to work in the most challenging of circumstances. They've faced not only with the highest level of demand, but with much reduced resources as absence rates due to sickness and self-isolation correlate with the very high infection rates that I've just mentioned. And I must say that the root cause of the acute difficulties and challenges faced with demand far outstripping capacity is the government's massive underfunding of the sector over the past decade, their total lack of any sort of understanding or appreciation of what's required to provide the health and medical care system the nation should expect and deserves, and their complete failure to plan for this or any other type of national crisis, even though they had the opportunity to do so back in 2016-2017. Mr Mayor, fighting COVID-19 was never going to be a walk in the park. But the dire situation the health and care sectors have been put in is just not fair or necessary, and they deserve better these past 2 years. But as I've said many times, we are a resilient city, and whilst the latest variant is having an impact on pretty much every service, organisation and setting in the land in some way, incredible efforts are going into ensuring that particularly vital frontline services are kept going across Sunderland, and our most vulnerable residents are supported, protected and have everything they need. So once again, my huge gratitude to all involved. It's been a long, long haul now, and the dedication, flexibility and resilience shown every single day is just outstanding. Obviously, the arrival of the variant confirms that we're far from being out of the woods yet with COVID, but with the vaccination and booster programmes having proved to be absolutely vital in our fight against COVID and the damage it can do and has done to people's health, lives and livelihoods. So as ever, Mr Mayor, my plea to everyone across the city is to ensure they're protected so that they are protected from becoming seriously ill, and everybody gets the doses of the vaccine that they're eligible for as soon as possible. NHS teams and all those supporting them are working incredibly hard, as they have done for the past year, to keep Sunderland at the forefront of rolling out the vaccines and getting many people as vaccinated as possible, and they're doing a brilliant job again, so huge thanks to everyone involved. But it is a whole team effort, Mr Mayor, and we all need to keep on playing our part to drive infection rates down. Last week, along with a reduction in the self-isolation timeframes, the government announced the lifting of the COVID winter Plan B measures, including work-from-home guidance and the wearing of face coverings. I know and understand that this return towards normality will be very welcome by many, particularly in seeing the example set, or rather not set, by number 10, number 11 and number 12 Downing Street throughout the crisis, but I cannot emphasise strongly enough how important it is for us all to keep acting responsibly and to continue to be aware of the real danger that COVID still poses if we allow our efforts to slip. As restrictions are lifted and possibly coming to an end altogether in the next few months, we've got to keep on being mindful of whatever situation we're in and think about how we can prevent the virus from spreading. If that means testing and isolating, if positive, maintaining social distance still, or wearing a face covering in enclosed spaces, especially around vulnerable people, is necessary, then I know Sunderland people will do the right thing and make the right choices. There are many exciting things in the pipeline for everyone in 2022 in Sunderland, creating lots of opportunity for all kinds for our residents. So let's keep up the good work and let's keep COVID-19 at bay. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll conclude my update. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leader. And I'd just like to echo your thanks to our staff, and I'm sure every member in this room would like to thank our staff who have worked tirelessly and continue to work tirelessly to help our residents, not just with COVID, but with many other things that are happening in their lives. So thank you very much for that, Leader. Can we note the update from the Leader? Councillor Hodgson, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor Sunderland. I'd just like to ask a question on the COVID update about breweries. Now, obviously, we have a number of breweries operating in the council area. The government has released Omicron support grants for the hospitality industry, but breweries are not eligible. Would the Leader and the senior officers be able to confirm whether breweries will be allowed to apply for discretionary funds that the council has available? Thank you. Great. I think the industry would appreciate some clarification. Thanks.
Thank you. The next item is the city-wide approach to carbon reduction. And I would like to invite the Deputy Leader to present an update to Council on the city-wide approach to carbon reduction. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm pleased to update the members regarding ongoing progress being made in relation to our carbon neutral goals. In terms of reporting and of data, we have recently published our 2020 to 21 annual report for low carbon data, covering both the Council's emissions and citywide emissions. The key headlines from this are the Council's operational greenhouse gas emissions in 2020 and 2021 were 8,546 tonnes of CO2, which represents a 13.2% reduction from the previous year. Two areas which will need a particular focus to help us to accelerate our emissions reductions are gas consumption and our vehicle fleet. Citywide, 1.8 million tonnes of CO2 were emitted in Sunderland in 2019, the most recent year for which we have the data. This represents a 5.8% reduction from the previous year. Sunderland is on the way to meeting the recommended interim target suggested by the Tyndall Centre for 2015 and 2020 of a 16.1% reduction, which is aligned to the city's overall carbon budget covering the period of 2018 and 2020. Two areas which need a particular focus to help us accelerate our emissions reductions as a city are domestic gas and road transport, as these are currently the greatest challenges to decarbonisation at a citywide level. In our first ever submission to the Carbon Disclosure Project, Sunderland was awarded Grade A status. This was a huge achievement. This grade means that Sunderland is one of just 11 cities and 95 cities worldwide to be recognised as a leader in the fight against climate change. Following Cabinet approval earlier this month, the Council has reaffirmed its commitment to UK 100 by signing its new, more ambitious pledge. This commits the Council to seek to become net zero by 2030, building on our existing target of being carbon neutral by 2030, and commits the City as a whole to being net zero by 2045 or sooner if possible. In addition to significant work on the detail of our monitoring and reporting, workers continue to progress in each of the priority areas set out in the low carbon framework, in recent months with a strong focus on engagement. I am pleased to highlight the following activity. The Council coordinated a very successful tree planting day in December at the former Elmore Golf Course. 60 school children attended from a total of 6 nursery, primary and secondary schools, helping to plant a total of 420 trees. This action supports the wider proposals to create an eco-park on the site and links with the priorities of the Coalfield Neighbourhood Investment Plan. Funding for the North East Community Forest has now been approved to create a forest classroom for the new Sunderland school site by Doxford Park and to plant a new orchard at Hetton Park this winter. In addition, the charity Trees for Cities has also agreed to pay a further 8,500 trees to be planted at Elmore Park. The Council has also helped to facilitate the second meeting of an environmental green and sustainable group last week, which provides children and young people with the opportunity to feed their ideas into the 2030 Shadow Board and identify activity which they can take forward. One of the first areas of focus for the young people links to school and community groups, growing projects, and they have been learning about a number of city projects as well as sharing information on their own activity. Work is continuing as part of the public sector decarbonisation scheme, under which Sunderland was awarded £2.2 million to install air source heat pumps at 8 council operational buildings. Because of supply chain delays and storm delays, the government has extended the programme to enable all physical works to be completed by June 2022. Between January and November 2021, external funding from Eco3 and Eco3 Flex schemes have invested over £600,000 into 287 fuel-poor households, supporting gas boiler upgrades and insulation. A government grant from BEIS, which is the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, of £2.2 million has been awarded for pilot boreholes, which would lead to the harnessing of green energy via geothermal heat from the former Wearmouth Colliery. This power would be used to heat new homes at Riverside, Sunderland, as well as other buildings across the city centre. Grant funding from SMEs through the Regional BEST project, which helps small and medium-sized businesses with energy efficiency improvements, is now allocated, with 55 successful applications from Sunderland and a likelihood that we will exceed our greenhouse gas saving target of 614 tonnes through the investments which the BEST project has supported in businesses across the city. Grant funding through the citywide Breeze project has recently been able to be increased from £135,000 to over £500,000, which will allow more businesses across Sunderland to be supported with energy efficiency improvements. We will also be able to install solar PV and battery storage at St Mary's and Farringdon Row multi-storey car parks, as well as solar PV at the Bunny Hill Centre. Phase 3 of the Sunderland Strategic Transport Corridor was opened in November, linking the Northern Spire Bridge to the city centre. The route helps to relieve traffic congestion, provides a dedicated walking and cycle route along the full length of the route as we seek to encourage active and low-carbon transport, and also involves the planting of 1,700 trees and 25,000 shrubs. Sunderland Council was also awarded first place in the Cycle September Global Love to Ride Bike Challenge as a result of encouraging 21 of its staff to ride 2,888 miles and thereby saving 250 kilograms of CO2. Related to this, by the end of 2021, the Council Cycle to Work scheme had completed 130 orders in total. By providing the scheme, it is estimated the alternative trips undertaken by bike will save over 7,000 kilograms of carbon. And in terms of the use of e-scooters, a rider survey carried out in 2021 found that 31.8% of e-scooter trips directly displaced car trips in Sunderland, which equates to over 25,670 car trips displayed and over 9,220 kilograms of CO2 saved in the first 8 months of the scheme. And with regards to the mobility hub at Riverside Sunderland, the council is expecting to take delivery of the first Nissan Leafs in January 2022, with the remaining vehicles to follow early in February. I hope this provides a useful and positive update on the work that is going on within the council and with our partners. We will continue to provide updates to council as appropriate going forward. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, Deputy Leader, and a very comprehensive report on a very important issue, and I'm pleased that our council is taking the action that it's taken. Can we note the update from the Deputy Leader? Sorry, Councillor Mann? Mullen, Councillor Mullen. Oh, he's there.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've received a letter from Phoebe, aged 7, who has asked if I can ask the Deputy Leader what plans there are in place to replace the trees knocked over by Storm Arwen, and if she'll consider involving local schools in tree planting programmes.
Yeah, you go to the mic, sorry.
Just to confirm for Councillor O'Brien, yes, I will absolutely contact Phoebe and discuss this with her.
Thank you very much. Okay. We are now going to deal with the notice of motion which we had left over from the last council meeting. The first one is in relation to events on council land. Can I call upon Councillor Mann to read and move the motion? Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Afternoon, everybody. And I hope we can start the motion proceedings with something positive today. Mr Mayor and members, I'm pleased to propose and speak to this motion and to ask for your support. This motion was inspired by Sunderland resident Lisa Coates, who reached out to me to ask why our council have not yet joined the other North East authorities.
Councillor Mann, this part, you just move the motion.
Oh, I beg your pardon,
If
I'm
you just
reading
read the
the
motion out, and then I'll get your seconder to second it. Okay? So are you happy that you've read the motion out?
No.
So if you...
Would you like me to read it?
Yes.
Honestly, I've done this before. Much apologies, Mr Mayor. Events on council land. Council recognises the environmental damage and harm to both domestic and wild animals that can be done by balloons, paper lanterns and extremely loud fireworks. In recent months, Gateshead Council and North Tyneside Council have taken action to limit the harm to the environment and to animals caused by these. It's time for Sunderland City Council to take similar action. Council therefore resolves to ban balloon and lantern releases on council land, request a report to Cabinet on appropriate plots of council land that can be transformed into a memorial meadow, where residents can plant seeds and flowers in memory of loved ones, and ask that portfolio holder establishes at least one memorial meadow in the city. To enforce the use of low-noise fireworks for all events on council land by default, except in exceptional circumstances when the portfolio holder should be required to sign off on the decision to use fireworks that are not low noise. Thank you.
Councillor Mullen, do you second the motion?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you. There's always one, isn't there, Council? Don't be rude now. I heard who that was. I'll start again. Mayor and members, pleased to propose and speak to this motion and to ask for your support. This motion was inspired by Sunderland resident Lisa Coates, who reached out to me to ask why our council have not yet joined with the other North East authorities, the LA7, which include Gateshead, Northumberland, Durham, Newcastle and North and South Tyneside, to ban balloon and sky lantern releases on council land in order to protect marine and wildlife in our beautiful coastal and forested region. Balloon and sky lantern releases are becoming more popular for special occasions and celebrations such as weddings, birthdays, christenings, but also at bereavement memorials and funerals. They look great, they're fabulous, they have that wow factor, and everyone loves them. But that spell of prettiness is very short-lasting. They soon float away out of sight and memory. However, what goes up must come down. Balloons return to land, deflated, trailing ribbons and strings. Lanterns burn away and leave a wire frame behind that returns to Earth. This litter poses a threat to marine and wildlife. Over 80 local authorities have now banned these releases to protect our environment. Mr. Mayor, is it not time for our city to follow suit? There are growing concerns that balloons are carried out to sea where they can cause life-threatening problems for seabirds and marine animals. Already endangered sea turtles can mistake the waste for food and ingest them, blocking the digestive tract and causing them to starve to death. We have dolphins in our harbour, we have seals on our beaches, and we have otters in our river. We should be welcoming and encouraging these wonderful visitors, not potentially killing them. Terrestrial species are also falling victim to this threat, with birds, native animals and livestock becoming entrapped in strings, ribbons and lantern frames and ingesting balloon litter. Many manufacturers of balloons state that their products are 100% biodegradable. They usually do not state, however, that this can take up to 6 months and even longer when at sea than on land. Latex balloons supposedly burst into fragments with the pressure of ascent. They often, however, do not reach the required altitude for this to occur, becoming entrapped in trees, on buildings and in electrical equipment. There's also a fire hazard from lanterns, members. We will all remember the Krefeld Zoo fire, New Year 2020, which killed over 30 animals, including orangutans, gorillas, chimps and monkeys. Also back in 2013, a huge fire at a recycling plant in Smethwick involving 100,000 tonnes of plastic recycling material was thought to have been started by a sky lantern. West Midlands fire crews, 3 of whom were hospitalised, described it as the largest blaze they had ever seen. There are many other ways to celebrate special occasions and to remember loved ones, such as confetti, flying wish paper, seed paper and wildflower bombs. And we would like to encourage residents of our city to consider these alternatives. Mr. Mayor, balloon and lantern releases are now generally considered to be environmentally bad practice. I would urge our council to support this motion to ban mass releases on council land and to sign up to the Marine Conservation Society's Don't Let Go campaign. We ask that a memorial meadow is established in the city where bereaved families can plant flowers in remembrance and to use as a place of contemplation. We would ask council to enforce the use of low noise fireworks for all events on council land by default, except in exceptional circumstances. After last November's fireworks, which is a fond and traditional celebration with friends and family, it once again left me as a city councillor with an inbox full of complaints and concerns. We are a nation of cat and dog lovers, and many of our pets are terrified by loud and continuous noise that firework night brings. Residents have asked me for a long time if there's anything that can be done to alleviate this. Sunderland UK, on the website and Facebook page, always gives us advice on how to protect family pets prior to firework events in the city. But should we not, as a responsible authority, treat the cause rather than applying a band-aid to the symptoms? Of more concern is the distress and anxiety that loud fireworks cause to adults and children with autism and to residents who suffer from PTSD, including many of our city veterans. It is deeply disturbing to hear from residents with this condition who must endure hours, if not days, of acute anxiety not knowing when it will end, and
Mr.
losing
Mann, if
hours
you
of
can-
positive therapy. I'm nearly there, Mr Mayor,
Yeah,
thank
if you
you.
can wind up.
Is it not absurd that our council tries hard to make events inclusive by arranging accessible and autism-friendly cinema and theatre productions to then inflict on them the exact opposite at multiple events throughout the year? I ask our City Council to please help by supporting this motion and doing the right thing to protect our residents, our domestic pets, our wildlife and our precious environment. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Thanks, members.
Councillor Mullen, I believe you didn't reserve the right to speak. Do you wish to speak now?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'll speak just briefly to this motion, but particularly just to the issue of fireworks as outlined in the final bullet point. What we're requesting here is not a permanent blanket ban on fireworks, but for the culture portfolio holder to be required to sign off on the use of loud commercial fireworks on council land, so that somebody is seen to take responsibility for event organisers that are granted permission to use them, and to add an additional layer of oversight to authorising their use. The reason for highlighting this concern pertains to complaints about a recent event which took place in my ward over the Halloween weekend. This event led to me receiving more complaints about a single issue than I have received about any other single matter since becoming a councillor. The event took place over the Saturday and Sunday evenings of the Halloween weekend, and by Tuesday I'd received over 40 complaints directly and more on next door. These were not just from residents who lived directly around the park or indeed in my ward, but from us in Millfield, and each of them expressed concern at how loud the fireworks were, and in many cases, as Councillor Mann has just said, the impact it had on their pets. To give a sense of why there were so many complaints, I was in the Barnes pub at the time, sober, and the fireworks went off and the glass panes in the windows were shaking, leading people to go outside, including the staff, to see what was happening. Now, this isn't an attempt to criticise those event organisers. They had specified they would be using these fireworks and they were signed off by the council. So they delivered the event just as they had proposed it. But the appropriateness of this grid of firework wasn't flagged up by the council at the time, despite concerns raised by councillors. And when councillors have raised concerns about noise levels, parking issues and enforcement around this and similar events in the park, based on problems that have arisen when similar events have gone ahead in the past, the council's response has been insufficient to prevent the recurrence of issues that were predictable. No parking enforcement, late delivery of permit scheme details, and as I've highlighted here, nothing to tackle the noise levels. I wrote to residents in the surrounding areas of the park and streets beyond and asked them to complete a survey offering their feedback on this. And the strength of feeling amongst residents is reflected in the fact that, to date, I've had a 90% return rate on this survey, with a majority of residents stating that they either disagreed or strongly disagreed that the noise from the fireworks and music at the event was an appropriate level. Therefore, our motion intends to introduce greater scrutiny through the Cabinet member of plans to use fireworks of this nature on council land with a view to avoiding this kind of public backlash in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I understand that Councillor Williams wishes to move an amendment. Councillor Williams, will you read out the amendment?
Yeah. Will it be on the screen? Yes. Okay. So
It's not easy, is it?
it's not, is it? Looking at the amendment that I'm proposing, so delete the second paragraph and add a new paragraph as follows. In September 2018, Sunderland City Council therefore adopted a policy which banned the organised release of balloon and sky lanterns from council land. Sorry? Yeah. And at events supported financially or otherwise by Sunderland City Council, including those not on council-owned land. So just delete the third paragraph and add a new paragraph as follows. In order to revisit this priority, after council delete therefore, First bullet point, delete and replace with use our comms team to remind residents that organised balloon and lantern releases are banned. Second bullet point, delete and replace with request a report to Cabinet on appropriate plots of council land that can be transformed into memorial meadows. Residents could then plant seeds, flowers in memory of loved ones. Third bullet point, delete and replace with use the event application process to require event organisers to use silent or quiet fireworks. Council recognises, so the proposed amended motion will now read, Council recognises the environmental damage and harm to both domestic and wild animals that can be done by balloons, paper lanterns and extremely loud fireworks. In September 2018, Sunderland City Council therefore adopted a policy which banned the organised release of balloon and sky lanterns from council land and at events supported financially or otherwise by Sunderland City Council, including those not on council-owned land. In order to revisit this priority, Council resolves to use our comms team to remind residents that organised balloon and lantern releases are banned, request a report to Cabinet on appropriate plots of council land that can be transformed into memorial meadows. Residents could then plant seeds, flowers in memory of loved ones. Use the event application process to require event organisers to use silent, quiet fireworks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peter Walker, do you second the amendment?
I second the amendment, Mr Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams.
Okay, thank you, Mr Mayor. And posted up there what we would put. Just firstly, a little bit of a comment about copying and pasting notices on motion. We've been criticised in the past as a Labour group for doing that, so I was surprised when a colleague contacted me to say, did you know that this has gone as a Conservative group in Wigan, Bath, North East, Somerset, just to name a few. So let's just remind us, let's not throw houses if we live, let's not throw stones if we live in glass houses. Anyway, so I would actually like to thank colleagues across the floor for bringing it to the wider attention and letting us share tonight what is already there. It does need some amendments as proposed there. We do live in a more inclusive, caring world and now know about the environmental and personal damage which can be caused by all of those things. I'm sure, as we've already, as Councillor Mann's mentioned, we do care about the damage and death caused by balloons and lanterns to animals. I also recognise it's emotional to people who want to remember or celebrate their relative or friends. It's about finding alternative ways to remember without potential damage to animals or people. I've seen over the years parts of a garden which are planted out with shrubs or bushes for loved ones to go along and sit in their own garden and enjoy. Difficult when you move house, but while you're there. I've seen rockeries where each family member decorates a rock with pictures or quotes of the loved one and put it in a silent place where they can go out and talk. Quite often, the beach is another way that people like to go along and remember a loved one. You can sit there, contemplate the world going past and share your memories. The final part is about Wildflower Meadows, and that would be a perfect way to remember by looking at the flowers growing and waving in the wind. Remember, as a council, that's part of our commitment to Wildflower Meadows across the city where people think they'll be useful. But it would be good within a crematorium. There are already gardens of remembrance, and it would be an ideal complement to those gardens. People do remember their loved ones in a range of places and ways. In my family, we've got a small area in Cox Green where we go to remember my mother. This was where she was happiest in her life, and to just go there and stand, hear the wind in the trees and see the little birds jumping about is such a peaceful area and brings back happy memories for me. That was the place I was born. So, as a council policy, we don't give permission to release anything into the skies. We do need to be reminding people and we need to be looking at alternative options which aren't damaging to the environment. Fireworks, again, another traditional method of celebrating. As it's already been highlighted, anything from a birth, a wedding, passing of a loved one, as well as the traditional Guy Fawkes and New Year's Eve. But remnants of fireworks go absolutely all over, and it's nasty. Councillor Mullins already alluded to that. The stuff falls all over. It's not good. We also recognise loud fireworks can be scary to animals and people, as they're often unexpected and unpredictable. I enjoy beautiful fireworks display as much as the next person, but we should be looking for low or silent fireworks to allow the wider audience to enjoy the beautiful explosion of colours. We can use our event planning guidance to ensure that any events seeking permission must adhere to the low or silent type. The original notice of motion suggested that the portfolio holder should be allowed to agree exceptions. I think that's something we need to consider carefully. We don't want to have one person set out to be able to have a go at, to say you're only agreeing that for your friends or whatever, but we do need something. I'm going to request a Let's Talk consultation, which will capture the resident views of Wildflower Medals and crematoria and the use of low noise or silent fireworks. We'll also look to see how people do feel about noisy variety of fireworks and where they might be considered suitable, and how we could have a robust system if that's what we do. Not making any decisions, because we need to collect the information through consultation and come back to that debate. But again, part of that is going to be no balloon or lantern releases, and we will look at each crematorium to see where potentially wildflower meadows could be established. So, Mr. Mayor, I propose this amendment and encourage colleagues to support. Thank you.
You were right on time, Councillor Williams. Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment?
Mr. Mayor, could I just clarify that when this matter was to go to the November meeting, Councillors Fagan and Councillor Dunn had indicated that they wished to speak. Could I just ask if Councillor Fagan and Councillor Dunn wish to speak on the amendment? Councillor Fagan? No. Councillor Dunn? No. Thank you.
So does anyone wish to speak on the amendment?
Councillor Mullen? Councillor Tighe? Councillor Buick? So, Mr. Mayor, I think they're all the speakers. So the speakers are on the amendment are Councillors Mullen, Tighe, Buick, Councillor P. Walker, if he wishes to speak, as he reserved the right, and then Councillor Mann has the right of reply.
Thank you. We had Councillor Walker. You did reserve the right to speak. Do you wish to speak on the amendment, Councillor Walker? You did reserve the right to speak. Do you want to speak on the amendment? You can speak now.
No, it's fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Walker. Councillor Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly to let my group know that we will be supporting this, and I think some of Councillor Williams' suggestions were good ones, because places like Harrington Country Park could have very loud fireworks, but Barnes Park isn't appropriate for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tighe.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I will be supporting the motion as well. I did it within my group, made a couple of comments and reservations which I did have about the original motion and the new motion, to be fair. I think the concern was around the use of fireworks and loud fireworks, and I'll give an example of Remembrance Sunday. We just have to be very sensible when we use this. Remembrance Sunday, the Maroons are actually use a firework, common sense in days like now. We just need to take that into consideration. I think the biggest concern, and I hear what Councillor Mullen says, but I think the biggest concern that I have and residents have is about the use of antisocial fireworks and people being able to buy them from the days with people on the street, to be fair. People that would usually sell cigarettes are now selling fireworks at this time of year, and they're quite openly available on social media and things like that. And I think we need to be lobbying government and make some national changes around the use of fireworks and just having organised displays, because I think people are probably sick of the issue around the organised fireworks, but was probably a build-up of what they had to endure for the weeks and the months leading up to that. Indeed, in Silksworth, we have one shop that pops up and becomes a fireworks shop. And to be fair, on the main, it's a main road, it's Silksworth Road, and the madness is they do displays on the footpath directly outside the shop and advertise it on social media to try and sell that. And that's criminal, and I think that's more of a concern to me than the organised displays. If you think of things like the air show, there's no way we want to prevent a firework display at the air show, but firing out to sea. So we do need to be very sensible. As I say, I will be supporting it, as is my duty. The only other one thing I do want to make a comment on is, and again, I understand about balloon releases, but as colleagues know, I do work in a voluntary capacity in a youth organisation, and young people do express the loss of a young person with balloon releases. We've had a few in the city. We've had Blaine Gray, whose life was taken from us. And the young people, that's a way that they felt that the best way to express it. So we just need to be really, really conscious of that. I understand the consequences of balloon release, but we just have to obviously take those young people on the journey with us and make sure that we do provide an alternative. And I think the simple reality from both this notice of motion and the other is they'll just go and do it not on council land if that's what the rule says. And reality, what was the consequence if they did do it on council land? We haven't got the balloon police going to stand around the corner. We can't, well, we've got a notice of motion about policing tonight. We can't police things that seriously need tackling, never mind balloon release. So it's just about being sensible, take into consideration, and that's all what I would appeal for, Mr. Mayor. Thanks.
Councillor Bewick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just be quick on this. The original motion from Councillor Mann, I agreed with some points of that, and if the motion was read out in November, you might have been the first one in the country to do it instead of copy and pasting. But yeah, as Councillor Ty says as well, we're never going to be able to enforce this stopping balloon releases on council land or fireworks as well. When this motion was coming in, I think in November, I was going to mention about the time, if we ban fireworks on council land, there's going to be private fireworks display, which is going to put members of the public at risk. And I don't know if people can remember, around about the bonfire time, there was a pub in Gateshead, they didn't have permission, they'd done a private fireworks display, and the fireworks ended up going in the crowd. I think that's what we've got to be mindful of in Sunderland. Like I say, we don't want unregulated fireworks display or balloon releases, but as Councillor Ty says, we can't enforce it, police not enforce it, and the council haven't got the manpower, people power to do it. But one other thing I'd like to say is we cannot have an outright ban on balloons. People will release them, and at the day, these people's businesses as well. We've got to think about that, whether they can change the type of balloons they sell for biodegradables or won't. I think it's something what I'm going to look at, and I will be back in the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mann. Councillor Mann, you do have the right to reply. Are you fine? We now will need to vote on the amendment. We're voting on the amendment. Do we need a show of hands? Show of hands? Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. So that amendment is carried. We need to read it out, and bear with me because, as you can see, the screen's that way. Council recognises the environmental damage and harm to both domestic and wild animals that can be done by balloons, paper lanterns and extremely loud fireworks. In September 2018, Sunderland City Council therefore adopted a policy which banned the organised release of balloons and sky lanterns from the council land and at events supported financially or otherwise by Sunderland Council, including those not on council-owned land. In order to revisit this priority, Council resolves to use of Combs team to remind residents that organised balloons and lantern releases are banned. Request a report to Cabinet on appropriate plots of council land that can be transformed into memorial meadows. Residents could then plant seeds, flowers in memory of loved ones. Use the event application process to require event organisers to use silent/quiet fireworks. Thank you very much, and we agree that. Now, I understand that the Liberals, Councillor Paul Gibson, you may also wish to move an amendment. In view of what's happened, do you wish to move an amendment? And in that case, do you need to rewrite it, reorganise it? Can you come to a microphone, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Basically, it's to add an additional bullet point to the ones which Councillor Mann's already provided us with. And it will read as follows. To request the report to Cabinet to consider banning all blood sports on council land, such as fox hunting, in brackets including trail hunting, hare coursing, deer hunting, etc. This should not exclude the culling of animal populations when it is required for genuine environmental and/or conservation reasons. The purpose of the amendment is a friendly one and is designed to broaden and strengthen the original motion. The rationale for wanting to ban council land, blood sports on council land, is as follows. Firstly, the protection of domestic animals, cats, dogs, guide dogs, torn to pieces by out-of-control hounds and the effects on their owners.
Councillor, sorry to stop you. We've just been discussing what you started with, and obviously we've let you go outside of the way we operate. You should have first of all proposed the notice of motion, and then we needed a seconder. Of course. Correct. I was coming into it. Yeah. Don't be rude. Yeah, I don't know whether you heard, Councillor Miller. You should have used the mic, Councillor. You know, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. What you're requesting really should be a request to Cabinet.
Yes, indeed.
All I can advise you is that you either send it as a request to Cabinet, or, as the leader said, you bring it back to Council as a correctly worded, properly presented, so that we can understand. I'm not saying that you're not speaking well and you're trying to make us understand, but to throw this on the end of a notice of motion, which has dealt with fireworks, balloons and so forth, is completely out of order. It would be much better if you take the consideration either to present it to Cabinet for consideration, or you bring it back at a later date as a notice of motion.
It will probably be brought back in the next few months, Mr. Mayor.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. So, the last thing to ask on this one, can we agree the motion? Agreed. Thank you. Right, well, we are moving. Right, the next one, if you remember, that we have to deal with from the last meeting, is the notice of motion, which is on the subject of establishing a shadow young people's consultation board. And can I call upon Councillor McKeith to read and move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the motion reads as Establishment of Shadow Young People's Consultation Board. Council resolves to establish a Shadow Young...
Mr Mayor, I can't hear him. Can you remove his mask while he's talking on the microphone?
Council resolves...
Councillor, if you're comfortable to remove your mask at the microphone,
Thank you, Mr.
it does
Mayor.
make it better for us to hear.
So, Council resolves to establish a Shadow Young People's Consultation Board through which the Council and its leadership will consult with young people on important issues to them and on key areas of the Council operations such as budget settings. This board will also invite partners such as TFC, CCG, Nexus and others to consult with young people on what they're doing in their area of service provision to enable young people to share what they think can be improved upon and what changes or developments they wish to see. This board will consist of young people, councillors and leadership of all political parties on the Council working together to improve young people's representation in the city. I so move the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sam Johnson, do you second? Thank you. Councillor McKeith, do you wish to speak to the motion now?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion's purpose is to give the next generation more of a voice in this city. I think it would be rude of me not to start off with saying what Together for Children are currently doing to include young people within the city. And firstly, I would like to start with saying how they're doing a fantastic job with their participation and engagement groups, which are accessible to all young people in Sunderland. And as you can see, the Youth Council are also having a meeting behind me up in Committee Room 1. So recently at Children Learning Skills Scrutiny Committee, we were presented with a report from young people from Change Council, Youth Council and the other groups. And in this presentation, there are examples of what young people would like to see in the city and what they also think needs improving. At this meeting, I asked the Chair if a working group could be established to work more closely with these groups to see what they're currently working on and what we as a Scrutiny Committee can work alongside with them. However, since I've spoken with young people that are part of these groups, and the feeling is strong that they would like to be consulted on major decisions and areas of operation within the Council. So, when the representation is there from young people, why shouldn't we take the opportunity to involve them? As I've outlined what's currently being done, I still think more can be done through this motion, given that the young people, in their words, would like to speak to the top dogs. As outlined, this board would consist of partners, council directors, political leaders and members, which in turn would bind the members to attend these meetings and listen to their views. If this motion is agreed, in order to demonstrate that its considerations and recommendations are being followed by leaders, there needs to be a mechanism set in place to show that these views are being taken into account and that this is not merely a shop window for leaders to say that they are consulting with young people, which I fear may have been done historically. This board would have the power to determine its own agenda through the young people involved. However, an example of what they could look at is what they would like to see in the city, as this could coincide with the leader drafting a budget, scrutinising cabinet papers for young people to understand why certain actions have been taken, a meeting with partners such as Nexus to discuss what they're doing for young people and how they can improve their provision in partnership with the council, and much more. So I know my colleague Councillor Johnson is now going to lay out how this has worked in other areas of the country, but I urge all councillors to vote for this motion as it gives some level of power in consultation to young people who are, of course, the future of Sunderland. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. I understand that Councillor Farthing wishes to move an amendment. Can I ask you to read the amendment now, Councillor Farthing?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the first line, insert the words explore the before the word establish and the suffix meant at the end of the word establish, and remove the word shadow. Second line, remove the word important before the word issues and the words to them that follow, insert the words over which the council has influence or control after the word issues. Fourth line, delete the word will and insert may, and delete the word partners and insert other bodies after TFC, insert police, the commissioners and providers of health and public transport, etc. And after think, delete they. and add an additional fourth paragraph that a report be brought back to Cabinet at the earliest opportunity and no later than 6 months from the adoption of this motion on the establishment of the board. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Leader, I believe you second this amendment.
Second, and reserve the right to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak? Sorry, Councillor Farthing. Councillor Farthing, speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, why have I moved this amendment? Well, as the person, and it was many years ago when I was relatively a young person myself, that I instigated the setting up of what was then called the Youth Parliament. It's now known as the Youth Council, and I thought we already had the equivalent of a youth board. TFC already has many consultation bodies, as has been alluded to by Councillor McKeith. There's obviously the Youth Council, there's the Youth Members of Parliament, there's the Change Council for 10 to 15s, the Change Council 16 plus, there's Early Help Boys and Girls groups, the STARS, the LGBTQ group, and Young Commissioners. So we've got bodies of consultation groups already. And another thing called Voice, which is a very informal feedback for young people who were cared for or care experienced. Now, the most exciting innovation in consultation came about as a result of the Holiday Activity Fund. Easter was remote and providers were in some parts of the city shy of commitment because of potential COVID restrictions already committed to other ventures for the summer programme. Necessity being the mother of invention resulted in the half bus taking services and activities to all parts of the city. The half bus morphed into the TFC We're Here For You bus, which is adapting its service in co-production with young people and their families. It has enabled TFC and delivery partners to gain a greater understanding of young people's situations to increase the appropriateness of intervention and services. These views and inputs have been gained from across the city. We also have the Carbon Board. Washington has its own youth council, and I'm sure other areas have something similar. Recently, I heard that Health Watch are recruiting young health champions, and the list goes on. Do young people really want a further body? Let's ask them and find out. Perhaps we can adapt what is already in existence rather than starting from scratch, depending on what people tell us. And if we are to take this forward, we need to ensure that it's enduring. The CCG expires later this year, and it is a commissioning body, not a provider. We also need to set a deadline, and I'm being very kind here to the proposer of the original and seconder of the original motion, because we could have just left it, and it might easily have got sort of kicked into the long grass. But we decided in the Labour group that we'd want to sort of deadline it. So this is why we added the final paragraph. So we need to set a deadline for the expiration, hence the timescale for the report to come back to Cabinet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Farthing. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment?
Councillor Mann.
Councillor, got two here.
Sorry, Councillor, I can't see who it is. Could you give your name? Thank you.
And then behind him.
Oh, there's one behind.
Yeah.
And who's that behind Councillor Johnston, please? Councillor Wood.
And then you've got Councillor Butler.
Councillor Butler.
And Councillor Butler.
That's it, I think.
I think that's everyone, Mr. Mayor. So the speakers are Councillors Mann, S. Johnston, A. Wood and Butler, and then Councillor McKeith has the right of reply on the amendment.
Councillor Johnson, you reserved the right to speak, and Councillor Miller reserved the right to speak. Councillor Johnson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Allow me first and foremost to put on record my praise for Together for Children's work on making sure that young people in the city are listened to by them. I recently attended a Children's Scrutiny committee meeting where various groups of young people were represented and told us what their priorities were for the city. As I sat in that committee, I was incredibly impressed by the young people who were there representing their peers. They provided fresh insight, fresh ideas, and a different perspective on city matters, the one that I have, even though at the age of 21, I still think I'm quite young. I certainly benefited from listening to them, and I know that other members of the committee felt the same way. It was at that meeting that I realised the city's leadership should be doing this type of thing too, hence the need for this motion. The benefits of establishing a young people's board are tangible, and I'd like to raise some interesting testimonies from other local authorities who've introduced similar schemes of their own. Firstly, Ringwood Town Council worked with a local secondary school to recruit student advisors who would provide their views to councillors on a regular basis. The authority benefited from this move as many councillors did not regularly speak with young people once their children had left home, and this provided them a way of connecting with the young people who were going to be most affected by their decisions in the long run. Meanwhile, Glasgow City Council established a Youth Engagement Policy Commission where councillors met with members of the Youth Parliament, LGBT youth groups, and other stakeholders to work collaboratively to tackle barriers to youth engagement in democracy, identify council policy areas where young people feel that change is needed, and to consider how the council can better keep in touch with young people and inform them of the latest developments. Finally, I'd like to highlight Derby City Council's Children and Young People's Partnership Participation Strategy 2020 to 23, which is available online and worth reading for those who are serious about engaging with young people. It not only highlights the legal duty that local authorities have to listen and engage with young people, but it also serves to highlight some of the more general benefits of youth engagement and some strategies we may wish to take forward. Indeed, by listening to and working regularly with young people, we're invariably going to co-develop services that are better suited to what young people need and want. This benefits young people who are going to get a better experience from council services, and taxpayers are going to get better value for money, which is so important when council tax has increased so much in recent years. We're also going to help young people to engage with the democratic process and build their confidence, making them feel valued and respected in our city. This can only be a good thing, but I would like to stress that this will only happen if the interaction with young people is a meaningful exercise and not just an attempt by the council to receive an affirmation for its current policies. To close my speech, allow me to say the following. This is a council that often talks about wanting to secure Sunderland's future. Indeed, that exact phrase was used during the last meeting when discussing the city plan. If we're serious about that, it's time to start listening to the future, and passing this motion is the way to make us do that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Leaders, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, I believe the amended motion is a better motion, and that any engagement with our young people is to be warmly applauded, as they are the citizens of the city like the rest of us, but more importantly, they're the future of the city. I felt that we have to deal with the suggestion that somehow this council doesn't listen to its young people, which is just nonsense. From our youth board, youth council engagement with children from primary schools and up, right the way through what we do with our health partners, the Health and Wellbeing Board, what Together for Children are doing through all their engagement activities with young people. There is a great deal of consultation going out there with residents, right up to the latest iteration, which is that we've got young people fully engaged with the Shadow 2030 board, telling us what the City Council needs to be doing with its partners to ensure that we hit the carbon reduction targets, so that this council is carbon neutral by 2030 and that the city, ideally, is carbon neutral by 2040. So a consultation board, I'm absolutely fine with it. Anything that engages, and the Labour group support this, anything that engages with the future leaders of the city, which is our young people, to get their views, will always be strongly supported by the Labour group in the city. I just felt it had to be said that the suggestion that we don't do it is nonsense, and anything else that comes forward in this field we will happily look at. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support the motion and I support the amendment because the amendment, I believe, improves it. If anybody knows the children and the youth, it will be Councillor Farthing in our city. Councillor Miller were not suggesting whatsoever that we weren't listening to the voice. We would never do that. Why would we do that? What we're trying to do and what we are enabling, and obviously Councillor Farthing agrees because she's amended it to the positive, we're giving them a stronger voice. That's what we're looking for, a louder, a different, a stronger voice. So it's not nonsense, Graham. It's the fact of what we're listening to by the youth in our communities. So what I'm hearing, I often find myself talking to groups in my duty, or individuals, students, pupils, community youth, or indeed friends or families of residents, about opportunities, about activities, and there may be groups. Councillor Farthing's just listed several, but they don't know about it. We need to get the message across to the youth loud and clear, in my opinion, about youth provision, about engagement, about communication, about education. Quite often these conversations turn into the increase of antisocial behaviour, about why this is happening, because what is there to do? How can they talk about this? I've asked our young people what they would like to see in our city. I've asked them what they would like to see in the community where they live. While sometimes there's great engagement, some of them do know about the groups that Councillor Farthing's mentioned. Most of them don't. In my ward, they don't know about it. They say things like, well, what's the point? No one ever listens to us. They say, there's no one to talk to because they haven't been signposted. They'll say, they never ask us what we want. They give us what we don't want. So how is that listening to them, to the people that I can bring them here? And I know that they do have representation, but the representation is very small. So this is why this shadow board would improve that. It's another tool. It's not nonsense, Graham. It's a tool. It's something good that we're trying to do here for our youth. It's a worrying situation.
Mr. Mann, two moments.
I did not say that the board was nonsense. I said that the suggestion being made by the people who raised the notice of motion was nonsense. Let's be absolutely clear on that. I fully support having engagement with young people. This group does. It was not nonsense to them. It was the suggestion that being raised. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mann.
I suggest that what Councillor Miller said is just nonsense because that's not what we are suggesting at all for the second time, Graham. Perhaps you're hard of hearing these days. Nevertheless, it is a worrying situation. It could be seen that our youth are not worth listening to, that they have no voice, or they have no power to enable them to have a say in their own future, to engage in policy making, to shape their future and to see results. These youths are the minds of tomorrow. Their education and life experiences are so very different from some of the older generations that may be present in this chamber, with no disrespect, who are in the position to make decisions that affect them fundamentally. Their opinion is valid and useful to us. Their voice should be heard and utilised to make our city a better place to live. We would do well to listen to new and innovative thoughts and ideas from the employees, business people, entrepreneurs, architects, carers, nurses, doctors of the next generations if we want to keep them in our city. Many of the youth of our city literally don't have any voice at all. Many young people of our city are non-verbal, have a disability or special educational needs. There are young carers. There are young people who have mental health issues. Many, however, still have the capacity to make choices and to have ideas. Who listens to this cohort? Do we have a group in place where they're represented? And who speaks on their behalf? The establishment of a shadow young people's consultation board with multi-agency support, which is what we suggested, would give our young people the opportunity to have a say in service provision and development and education.
Councillor Mann.
It could allow two more. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. It could allow for advocate representation so that the voice of our youth is democratic and fair. It would be of immense value to the city's data collection and consultation processes, and it could really make a difference. I strongly urge members to support the motion and the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Airwood. Airwood.
Evening. I like the ethos of the amendment and bill. What I don't like is another layer, thank you, another layer of consultation. Another layer of consultation. Is that better? Marvellous. What we seem to be doing is adding in extra months of waiting to engage those people up there. We could do it now. Well, not all leave now and go upstairs, but in your area committees, you can be engaging with the youth groups that exist today. Why does it need this? So my ask is, reject this and go and actively speak to those young people. They've got fantastic ideas. Bring them on board with your area boards and listen to them. Don't wait 6 months to bring in another layer of consultation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to say I hope we can get cross-party support for this motion and the amendment. I sit on a management committee at Southwick Neighbourhood Youth Project, based in Southwick, what's been there for 40 years, which is longer than I've been alive, believe it or not. And I think it's really important to engage the youth, and they have done that for the past 4 decades. And the success it has is phenomenal. We have military officers that came out of there, both RAF and Army. We have engineers, and all of this is done through listening to young people, inspiring these young people, and just giving them a voice. And I think any decisions that we make should involve the people we're making them about. And that's the most important thing. In Southwick, we are quite lucky. We have the Sunderland Carer Centre as well. And there they have a young carers board as well. So young people are listened to in the city, certainly by the Labour group, and what I would say is by the council on a wider perspective. But we can always do better. And if we sit there and think we can't, then we're a little bit blinded. But what I will say, Mr. Mayor, growing up in a place like Southwick, from an African proverb, if a child is not embraced by the village, then they'll burn it down to feel the warmth. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McKeith, you have the right to reply.
Thank you. So just firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Fartham for prior notice of an amendment. Just firstly, I'd like to go on to Councillor Wood's point. I get what you're talking about, but can I ask, are you already doing that? Have you already spoken to them? Because you have? Well, that's fantastic, but I think this is something that's needed, so it covers all 5 area committees, and it will take forward change. Instead of 2 years down the line, it all falls apart and we stop that connection. Just moving on to Councillor Miller's point, we do have a lot of groups through Together for Children, and they've run very, very well. But can I ask the last time you attended one, or any member of your cabinet? Because this motion's to put you in front of these young people, and that's what it's all about. So I don't get your point on that point, and the whole purpose of this is to enhance the voice of the young people in the city. So the Conservative group will be supporting this amendment. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. We need to vote on the amendment. Show of hands. Agreed. Sorry. Someone wish to speak? I think it was quite substantive that the vote was yes for the amendment, so I won't be calling for a recorded vote. Well, we can put you down as a no or an abstention, whatever you wish. Fine?
Mr Mayor, through you.
2 minutes.
Mr Mayor, through you, any member who wishes their own individual vote to be recorded has the right to request that. So if Councillor O'Brien would like his own individual vote recorded, we can do that in the minutes. Or anyone else who wishes that to be the case.
Right, we'll have a show of hands against. We've got... Well, we've seen from the group what the vote is for. Now I'm giving you the opportunity what the vote against. So we've got you.
Lib Dem group. The whole.
Councillor O'Brien. Councillor O'Brien, we're not at a football match.
Okay.
Does all the members who wish to vote against wanted recording? Do you wish to have your no vote recorded? Right. Those who are saying no, put your hands up and we will record your names in the minutes.
This is Lib Dem group.
If I can, look, it's difficult enough with masks on and it's very essential. If I can ask from the left for the councillors to just say the name and we will take your name and record that. Sorry, you're right, sorry. My left. Thank you very much, Councillor Snowden. Right, where were we? The gentleman behind, Councillor, you're against?
He hasn't stood up. He's going to stand up. Not stand.
You wish to stand up and give us your name? You're against. Thank you. Coming along. Councillor, take this debate out. Councillor.
Stand up.
Councillor O'Brien.
Sit down, please.
Take that debate out of this chamber. Listen, if you don't understand the protocol of the council, then you need to take some training. If you continue with this attitude, I will ask you to leave the room. So, I take it that you are voting no. Right, move on. Is there any abstentions? Right? Thank you very much.
Just carry on. Just carry on. Just carry on.
Does any member wish to comment further on the new substantive motion? Councillor Mullen.
Councillor Mullen.
Councillor Farthing.
Councillor Farthing.
That's it. Councillor Mullen.
That was like entering a new plane of existence. I just want to make two very brief points, Mr. Mayor. The first is to say that, as you will see from looking at my group, we have a lot of young members in it already. A quarter of us, not me, but the others are under the age of 25. And as a group leader and previously a chairman of the Conservatives in Sunderland, I massively support their input and the value that they add to our group. Offering a bit of insight, when I first got involved in the Conservative Party in Sunderland, I got involved with the Young Conservatives, which was chaired at the time by Robert Oliver, aged 46. And I'm 30. Now we have a vibrant young wing. Almost half of our membership in Sunderland is under the age of 26, and we take all of their comments seriously and allow them to have input, and it's truly valuable. So if the council is doing the same, I think that will benefit the city massively. The second point, I think Councillor McKeith was a bit too modest to say this, so I'm going to say it in his defence. He was asked to bring forward this motion by officers within Together for Children. So those who have mocked it and voted against it, saying it's not necessary, might want to tell council officers that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Farthing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the main reason that I asked for 6 months to get this sorted is that my previous experience of our other partners in the city was that they were very reluctant to allow their engagement officers to support any sort of consultation with young people, and it has all been left down to TFC. And I'm pleased that sort of that recognition has been voiced right across the council chamber this evening, because without TFC's engagement, we would have very little engagement with young people. To some extent, I think over the last 2 years, because of lockdowns and the fact that we weren't mixing, that we haven't necessarily been meeting up with the Youth Council and the other youth groups in the way that we did in the past. But hopefully, you know, as we go forward, that will change. And I'm pleased that Councillor Sam Johnson mentioned Derby City Council. I'll certainly have a look at their policy and see if what we need to do to tweak ours to make sure that we do that. Many years ago, when I was setting up what was the Youth Parliament, there were 1 or 2 schools that didn't take part, that didn't sort of send youth representatives. So I did have to write to schools to sort of remind them that they really needed to sort of ensure that young people took part, because we do need that wide participation from across the city. And I would remind all councillors that we have always had a very well-supported State of the City debate where young people have come together from across the city, both from schools and youth groups. So we have had, that representation and their voice on topics which they choose. We don't choose them, they choose it. And for Councillor Mann's benefit, there is a group for children with disabilities. It's called STARS. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I did see the councillor's hand go up late. I'm more than happy to give you the opportunity to speak.
Councillor Johnson, yeah.
Councillor Johnson, isn't it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to first and foremost thank the Labour Party for the constructive, mature way they've approached this motion. I think their amendment is a genuine improvement, and thank you to them for that. As for our colleagues in the Liberal Democrats, yet another pathetic stunt on your part. This is every meeting you do something ridiculous. This motion is clearly for the Goodless City, and history will not judge you kindly for voting against it, because the young people you're denying a voice to are the voters of tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. It's a good job I went to Specsavers. Right, here we go. Council resolves to explore the establishment of a Young People's Consultation Board through which the Council and its leadership will consult with young people on issues over which the Council has influence or control and on key areas of the Council's operations, such as the budget settings. This board may also invite other bodies, such as TFC, police, the commissioners and providers of health and public transport, etc., to consult with young people on what they are doing in the area of service provision. This is to enable young people to share what they think can be improved upon and what changes or developments they wish to see. This board will consist of young people, councillors and leadership of all political parties on the council, working together to improve young people's representation in the city. That a report be brought back to Cabinet at the earliest opportunity. Board. Can we agree the new substantive motion? Thank you very much. Someone? Oh, Councillor Hudson? No bother. Can we have a vote, those that are voting against? And you identify yourselves, obviously Councillor Hudson.
Councillor Haswell.
Thank you. Any amendments? Sorry, any abstentions? Want to get another set of amendments there. Last thing we want. Right, thank you. We'll move on to item 9, the reception of petitions. Do any members have any petitions to present?
Mr Mayor, through you, we have received prior notice of petitions to present from Councillors Doyle, Mullen, MacDonough and Crosby.
Is there any more?
Councillor Noble.
Councillor Noble. Okay. Fine. Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If we can return to some normality now, that'd be nice. I'd just like to present a petition on behalf of the councillors of Fulwell, St Peters and Southwick, signed by over 1,500 residents, which calls on Sunderland City Council to save the site of the former Sainsbury's store on Station Road in Fulwell. It asks the city's councillors to take account of how traders on Sea Road and people who live or work in the Sea Road area of Fulwell are suffering due to the recent loss of the main retailer. They don't want Sea Road to decline in the same way as similar shopping centres in Sunderland and other towns and cities in Britain. The paper petition, started in December 2021, says, "We, the undersigned, are particularly concerned by the loss of convenience experienced by elderly and disabled people in particular, and the impact upon those who do not have ready access to private motor vehicles." Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take the next one. Councillor Mullen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A petition signed by 3,955 residents calling on Sunderland Council to find Luciana's restaurant a new city centre space and to support their relocation, securing their future in the city.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonough.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'm very happy to present a petition from residents of Farringdon, the wonderful residents of Farringdon, to add Arbroath and Archer Roads in Farringdon to the Council's priority gritting routes. That's signed by 223 residents.
Thank you. Councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a petition from residents in Grindon, Hastings Hill, Springwell and Thorney Close, which reads, "We, the undersigned, petition Sunderland City Council to remove the £25 fee for a replacement wheelie bin where a bin has been stolen, set on fire, where a resident moves into a new property and there is no bin, or when a resident cannot afford the fee." Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The petition to look at traffic calming measures between Dartington Close, Delfield Drive and St John's Field. I would like to present a petition on behalf of 17 residents who would like Sunderland City Council to assess the number of vehicles speeding in the above locations where children are playing and look at increased level of traffic and noise from vehicles. People are using Dalton Drive as a shortcut, and we would like the original plans looked at when houses were built, which stated there would be no access route through Dalton Drive for residents. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Can we agree to refer all of those petitions to the appropriate chief officers? Thank you. We now move into item 10, which is written questions to members of the public. We start with a question for homelessness in the city from a Kevin Clark, who's a resident in Sunderland. Homelessness in the city. Can the leader please reply to this? Councillor G. Miller, you stated at a last meeting that there was no homelessness in the city. I have encountered people sleeping rough in your own ward. So can I ask what you claim as being homeless? So can I ask what you claim as being homeless? So can I ask, will you like to offer an apology to the people? And if not, will you kindly like to offer your resignation as leader, as some people could look at a vote of no confidence? And the leader, I believe you're sorry. We'll find out who's responding. Councillor Johnson, you nearly got promoted there, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll stand behind the mic instead of in front of it, like the Lib Dems. As a council, we have our designated housing options team who are available to support and assist anyone in the city who is homeless or at risk of homelessness. Additionally, work with Redchester providers and charities in the management and support of homelessness in the city. The cases of homelessness fluctuates, but we always do everything possible to help our vulnerable residents. We work with partners as necessary to provide advice, accommodation and support as is necessary and appropriate to meet the needs of everyone who is homeless or threatened with homelessness. Hence the award that we picked up at the start of tonight's meeting, Mr Mayor. And due to the work that this Labour-led council has put in place with the Housing Options team and with the fantastic working relationship we have with our partners, no one needs to be homeless in the city if those circumstances arise, as there is options and support available to them. And again, I would encourage members and the wider public to familiarise themselves with the correct channels to report homelessness to, so assessments can be carried out and that can be helped at the earliest opportunity to those people who are suffering from that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. The next question is from Gavin Brown, who's a resident of Sunderland, and it is a question which the leader, I believe, yes, the leader will respond to this. I have been watching the recent live streams of the council meetings, and too many times a councillor asks a question and the relevant person answering either doesn't answer or they skirt around the issue. Therefore, should the mayor robustly challenge the relevant councillor answering if they don't answer the question or skirt around it? Or is it time for an independent chair of these meetings with a strong candidate who can adequately challenge the defective or useless answers? Leader.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I am obviously answering this on behalf of all the members in the chamber here. And it is, I'll remind everyone, up to us, not the Mayor, to follow up on the questions that we ask. When a councillor asks a question, our council procedural rules allow for an appropriate supplementary question to be asked. It is therefore up to the councillor asking the initial question to follow up with a related supplementary question if they are not satisfied with the response given. But questions are answered fully, and if we run out of time, those questions that are not addressed with during a live council get a written response. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. The next question is from a Craig McCluskey, who's a resident of Sunderland. The OGR number plate. Can Sunderland City Council justify retaining a very valuable reg plate OGR1 when the council has a deficit? Could the approximate value of 10k to 15k that could be achieved by the sale of said reg plate not be better invested in the city? Councillor Stewart, I believe you're answering this one.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and can I thank Craig for the question. First of all, I'll start by saying that the registration plate was gifted to the council. Gifted to the council such a long time ago that I think in the ages that's passed, nobody could actually remember the reason why it was gifted to the council. I mean, I've been a councillor here since 1990, and I think only Peter Gibson's been here longer than me. Well, you all know the answer, then tell us. But it's the issue is that it was gifted to the council, in particular to the civic part of the council and the mayor. And the council does periodically consider such matters and has previously looked at whether it would be appropriate to sell the registration plate on. While we do not have the current evaluation, it is likely that it's going to be limited and it would have a limited impact on the multi-million-pound deficit that this council currently faces. As I said, the last review concluded that the distinctive registration plate, and it is distinctive for the main civic centre car, should continue, but it's something that we will continue under review. But I would say that it was something that is gifted to the council, and it's only really in the exceptional circumstances that we should really look towards selling things that are being gifted to us. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. The next question is homes at Aberdare Road. This is from a Martin Old, a resident of Sunderland. Could the council please outline the benefits of Gen 2 building approximately 32 3- and 4-bedroom homes on the Aberdare Road, Farringdon site? Can the Farringdon residents please know the cost of these new homes, the proposed rent for those homes earmarked for rent, and the numerical breakdown of houses for sale, houses for rent, and houses which are to be categorised as rent to buy? And the gentleman, the councillor, is Councillor Kevin Johnson, is answering that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and also thank you to Mr Old for this important question. Gen 2's Affordable Homes Plan is looking to deliver more than 1,200 new high-quality affordable homes for rent across Sunderland by 2026. The proposed development site at Aberdare Road is one of those sites that will contribute to the wider delivery programme. The majority of homes available will be for affordable rent, with proportion for affordable home ownership options, including shared ownership and rent to buy. The public consultation for this proposed scheme ran between the 14th of December and the 3rd of January, with the findings of this still to be concluded and a planning application to be submitted in March 2022. The Council therefore doesn't hold the information regarding the cost of the new homes, the proposed rent of these homes earmarked for rent, and the numerical breakdown of houses for sale, houses for rent, and houses which should be categorised as rent to buy. Therefore, I suggest that Mr Old looks for the consultation response, the planning application being submitted in March, and also contacting Gen 2 directly. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. The next one is affordable housing at Plains Farm. It's from Dennis Cook, who's a resident of Sunderland. Can the Leader please confirm the current status of the proposed affordable housing, the housing development earmarked for Plains Farm? Our local councillor, Phil Tye, reports to us that the application is still live and yet to be determined, but the local Conservatives are claiming a victory in getting the affordable housing development stopped. Firstly, what is the current status of the application? Secondly, Why would the local Conservatives be against its own government policy on affordable housing? And again, Councillor Johnson, you're responding to this one.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you again to Denise Cook for another important question around housing. I can confirm that the plan application referred to is very much alive and is due to go to the Planning and Highways East Committee in the next couple of months, once the applicant has resolved technical and other design queries. Unfortunately, I cannot offer an insight into why the local Conservatives may be against its own government's policy on affordable housing, nor why the local Conservatives thought they could mislead residents with blatant lies about this development, claiming that it's not going ahead, which is simply not true, and it is still in the planning process. Again, giving false information out and false hope to residents who might want to be consulted on this application. They must be following the lead of Conservatives at the top, thinking they can say and do whatever they want. The Prime Minister is a complete and utter embarrassment, and I suggest they stop putting out ridiculous posts like this and stop dragging local politics into the gutter for their own political cheap point scoring. They should leave this alone and stop interfering and let the ward councillors do the job that they were elected to do, instead of putting out more Tory lies after Tory lies like Boris Johnson's tongue they roll off them. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
The next question is increasing energy costs in schools. Sorry. Yep, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A point of personal clarification since Kevin Johnson invoked us. Can the portfolio holder explain why, in relation to this housing development, it was listed as having been withdrawn for a period of 9 days on the planning portal?
Thank you.
Provide a written response.
We move on to increasing energy costs in school from a Mark Burrell. He's a resident of Sunderland. As a school governor, at a recent meeting, the head teacher shared that energy costs have risen by 50% this year. For some schools, this kind of budget rise will impact on teaching budgets. Are there any national schemes to assist schools with this pressure? If not, can the council work with NEPO to look at getting schools to sign up to low-cost fixed tariffs if price volatility will be around for the coming future? Right, that one caught us out with a new teeth. Councillor Farthing.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I'd like to thank Mark Burrell for the question, which I think is very important at this time, as I agree that the rising cost of utilities is a concern for our schools, but also for residents, businesses and indeed the council. Schools are funded via the Dedicated Schools Grant, or DSG, rather than directly from council funds. Locally, the Schools Forum agree how the DSG is distributed to our schools in the city. Whilst the level of funding has increased on a per pupil basis, it is not broken down into specific parts for energy. Therefore, schools have to budget for utility costs in the same way as they do for staff and supplies. The North East Procurement Organisation, NEPO, does offer a regional approach to energy procurement, one that the Council takes advantage of as a core member of NEPO. This has not taken away the pressure of cost increases, but by combining aggregated consumption via NEPO, it allows greater market access, more dynamic products and better purchasing options. Therefore, the significant unit price increases we have experienced would have been higher had we not used NEPO's energy strategy. Schools are able to access this approach, and currently 104 schools and academies in the city do so. On top of that, the Council's energy conservation team offer a service level agreement to manage energy consumption, aiming to reduce costs and carbon emissions, which is currently taken up with by the majority of schools in the city. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. The next question is Pallion Shipyards, sent in by Brian Foster, a resident of Sunderland. At the Cabinet meeting, the leader said there is no interest amongst businesses or in council to reopen the Pallion Shipyard. Why are Labour candidates like Karen Noble and Eltham Haig, I hope I've getting that right, campaigning on the basis that they would, if elected, reopen the yard. What do they know about council's intentions that the leader does not? And the leader's responding to this one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. There is no business interest in opening Pallion shipyards. That's just the blunt truth of the matter. Councillor Noble and Evesham Hack, who's a Labour candidate for the Barnes ward, have never said that they would have elected reopen the yard. So the question is wrong. Karen Noble and Evesham Hack have said, like any good representative of the people, that they would look into the matter. And that is all they have said. And Councillor Noble particularly has gone the extra mile and met with residents and met with groups to engage to find out what their view was. But I have to reiterate that there is no interest in shipbuilding in Pallion shipyard from any business that the council is aware of or that the owners of the site are aware of, because they haven't told us. And that is just the blunt truth of it, I'm afraid. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. The next one is living in Sunderland. Kevin Leonard, a resident of Sunderland. Sunderland was ranked amongst the top 50 worst places to live in the UK recently. Why did Sunderland residents give their city such a low score compared to residents of Newcastle, Gateshead, Durham and Northumberland, which did not even feature? And Councillor Rowntree is responding to this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank Kevin Leonard for the question. I read the news report with interest. Whilst we were always happy to take on board feedback, I'm aware that the website on which this article is based highlights the fact that it isn't based on any published economic or demographic data. From what I can tell, the poll appears to have been voted on purely by readers of the publication which produces the list, and it's not clear how many Sunderland residents were involved in voting or how statistically valid the process was. What we do know is that Sunderland was ranked as the best place to live and work in the UK for the under-30s based on its living costs, high job satisfaction and a general happiness and well-being on the One Family Financial Services Livability Index a couple of years ago. And to make sure this is the case for residents of all ages, we are shaping priorities and the allocation of resources by listening to what our residents tell us. Our Let's Talk resident engagement programme helps us identify neighbourhood priorities and ensures residents can feed back on a range of issues. Recently, this is including changing priorities after COVID-19, how we allocate the council budget, and views on things like green space developments and physical activity opportunities across the city. And we're currently carrying out a resident survey which will give us residents' views on living in Sunderland, allowing us to further understand the issues that matter most to them so we can develop and deliver the highest quality services possible accordingly. My own experience of Sunderland, one that I know is shared by many, is that it's a great place to live with its beautiful beaches, coastline and green spaces, transport and travel links that are improving all the time, an ever-expanding housing offer and a warm and welcoming people. It's also a city with a very exciting future ahead of it, with all of the regeneration that's taking place at significant pace and scale. Ambitious plans for the city's continued transformation in the coming years are set out in the City Plan of 2019 to 2030. Being considered by Council this evening, building on the past couple of years of significant progress for Sunderland with the continued development of Riverside Sunderland, labelled the UK's most exciting regeneration site, as well as being at the forefront of the global digital revolution with awards including Smart City of the Year 2020, Digital Council of the Year 2021 and the launch of the groundbreaking Nissan EV36 Zero Electric Vehicle Hub project. All of this and the investments by big-name companies in the city centre, Washington, Horton-Spring and right across the city will create thousands and thousands of jobs. And these companies tell us again and again, Mr Mayor, that they want to locate to Sunderland, not only because it's a great place to do business, but because it's a great place for their employees to work, live and play. I hope this has provided assurance that the City Council very much wants to hear, take on board and place at the centre of shaping services and plans the views and feedback of our residents, and that we are absolutely committed to achieving the city plan vision of creating a connected international city with opportunities for all. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. The next question is council meetings from Simon Eyre, who's a resident of Sunderland. Sharon Hodgson shared a photo on Twitter of close to 70 Labour members and councillors meeting without masks or social distancing in the new City Hall against the council's own guidance. The council has been hiring the stadium light for meetings of this size, which now seem to be like a massive publicity stunt. Given that this is apparently to allow for social distancing, Labour councillors did not do this in private. So A, how much does it cost the council in total to hire rooms from the Stadium Light for meetings? And B, will the Labour Party leader apologise for breaking the council's rules when holding the meetings? And Councillor Checkers will respond to this.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I would like to thank Simon Eyre for his question. All council meetings are held after considering the COVID rules in place at the time, along with a specific risk assessment. Given the current government rule that council and committee meetings must be held in person, we have had to look at alternative arrangements for room bookings for full council meetings due to the number of members and officers in attendance. We have held meetings at the Stadium of Light and the Beacon of Light so far, as these rooms offered the required space. Whilst we are awaiting the invoice for the recent extraordinary meeting last week at the Beacon, I can confirm that the 3 room bookings at the stadium in June, September and November cost £877.50 excluding VAT for each meeting. In addition, to ensure public attendance was possible, we hired an additional room for the November meeting at a cost of £500 excluding VAT. The first externally held council meeting at the Beacon in May cost £420 excluding VAT for the room booking. There are also audio-visual costs to live streaming the meetings, but these are incurred irrespective of the location. In terms of the meeting Mr Eyre refers to, this was a private meeting of the Labour Group, which we have been invoiced for separately. It also acted as a test event for the new City Hall, and all COVID guidance and legislation which was in place at the time was followed. This included a full COVID risk assessment and precautionary measures taken, such as a much reduced capacity on numbers of people attending the event, and advice to participants on staying safe both before the event and on the day, such as being vaccinated, taking lateral flow tests, social distancing, hand washing and sanitising, and of course the wearing of face coverings. The statement within the question that this did not happen is of course simply not true. The suggested maximum COVID capacity for the rooms was adhered to at all times. Smaller groups and more rooms were used to facilitate this. And I personally, as the Cabinet Member for Health and a health professional, was very impressed with the conscientious and safe way in which attendees conducted themselves across the day. This test event and the lessons learnt from it have allowed us to be meeting here in this building today. And should Boris Johnson require anywhere to hold future parties because the Cabinet Room at Downing Street is not available, I can highly recommend the fantastic new City Hall here in Sunderland. Thank you.
The next question is Labour candidates from Peter Noble, a resident of Sunderland. Serving Labour councillors have been announced as candidates for wards other than the ones they are currently elected in. Carol Noble, AG, is the councillor for St Anne's, whilst being the candidate for Pallion. Can the leader of the council tell us, firstly, if this is against the council's code of conduct, and secondly, whether he would himself consider standing for election in one ward while serving as the councillor for another? And Leader, you're responding to that.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Councillor Noble, you must be doing something right, because you're getting some flack tonight from these questions. Now, to the question, nothing breaks the Council's Code of Conduct. Any resident of the City of Sunderland that lives within the footprint of the boundary of the City of Sunderland can stand in any ward in an election. That's just the rules. I believe that Councillor Noble's circumstances are caused by the fact that she lives in Pallion and would like the opportunity to represent Pallion after May the 5th. And whilst she is currently a St Anne's councillor, she will work right up till May the 5th as a St Anne's councillor. The reason I think that Councillor Noble wishes to move to Pallion is that she has 3 Liberal Democrat councillors in there, and they're making, her words, a right mess of the ward, and somebody needs to go in there and sort them out. And as we've seen from their behaviour tonight, Mr Mayor, I think everybody can believe that's probably true. Now, whether I myself would consider standing for election in one ward while still being a councillor in another, no. I've been a sitting councillor in the South Ward in Washington for 16 years. Everybody knows I live in the East Ward. The reason for that was back in 2006 when I was asked to stand as a Labour Party candidate. There were 3 Labour councillors in the East Ward, and there are still 3 Labour councillors in the East Ward, and they're doing a very good job. I've had the privilege and honour of representing the residents of the South Ward from Oxclose all the way down to Rickleton. And I've been through 4 elections, coming up for my 5th, and people have continued to re-elect me. So I expect that if I continue to do a good job, which those results would suggest I have done, that I've got a fair chance in the May elections of doing so again. So I will be standing in Washington South, like I've said all along. You know, it's a marginal ward. That's politics. But if you do the work as a local councillor, you tend to find the population support you. So I will not be looking to stand elsewhere while being a councillor in Washington South. And hopefully that puts that scurrilous rumour to bed. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. The next question, investment in Washington, from a Judith Headley, a resident of Sunderland. When will Sunderland Council start spending money on Washington? We pay enough into the coffers, would have very few improvements. This is a disgrace. Leader, I believe you're responding to this one.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. And the reason I need these papers is because these papers show everything that we're spending money on and have done and will be doing in Washington. So, thank you for the question. Judith, I am disappointed that you've got this view, as the Labour Party in Sunderland are investing significantly into Washington and across the whole city. Our refreshed city plan, which is being considered tonight, sets out the ambitions we have for a healthy, dynamic and vibrant smart city. Many of the services we provide in our capital investment will benefit all of our residents, businesses and visitors. This includes the environment, social services and leisure services, for example. I would also remind the Chamber that we ensure the decisions that are taken locally by ward councillors through the area committee budgets we have, both for revenue and capital schemes. So in terms of specific investment in Washington, and this list that I'm going to give you is large, but it's not exclusive and it's not the huge list I could have given. Ongoing investment in the International Advanced Manufacturing Park and the automotive industry around Nissan, with the recent gigaplant investment due to create a sustainable economic future for Washington and city residents through the not only creation of thousands of new jobs, but this basically ensuring that the existing several thousand jobs are protected. That's £1 billion. That's £1 billion investment in the city, but specifically in Washington, for the gigaplant and everything that comes off it. construction of a new Washington F-Pit visitor centre and improvements to Albany Park of £4.65 million. Linked to this is £150,000 to deliver a range of heritage and culture initiatives, support heritage community groups and contribute to promoting Washington as a visitor destination. £5.1 million on the Washington Football Hub with a 4G pitch that opened in November 2019 as part of the Parklife Football Hub's project. £5.245 million on major bridge maintenance works to the A1231 bridges and the 182 bridge. Housing delivery and improvement plan, £59 million was approved, the budget for this, and will deliver new and improved social housing in the 5 areas of the council, including Washington, whilst plans will develop as opportunities arise. There is the 4 new supported bungalows at Albert Place, now occupied, a planned conversion of the Washington Old School into 15 supported units, the purchase and repair of current empty homes, as well as next step properties in the area. £783,000 spent on safety improvements to junctions and existing cycling infrastructure on the A1290 between the A19 and the 184. £700,000 spent on a satellite site in Harriton to the new Harry Watts Academy to provide a further 64 ASD places, and that's autism spectrum disorder. £267,000 spent on a refurbishment of Oxclose Academy to facilitate an increase of 150 pupil number places. £90,000 on an upgrade to the sports facilities at the Washington AFC ground. £180,000 of area committee capital budgets this year to improve parks and play, and these funds supplement council investment of £320,000 into the parks and play in Washington. This follows nearly another £100,000 spent on Usworth Park and Princess Anne's Park recently. Area committee, responding to residents' concerns, has already committed £120,000 of capital for safety measures within the Washington parks, which will be installed in the coming months. £60,000 capital has been allocated to Bowes Railway Museum. £60,000 has been allocated to traffic management for vehicle activated signs, plus highways capital maintenance programme on local priorities of £100,000. Washington Area Committee has allocated £150,000 over the last 3 years for neighbourhood and ward improvements for proactive and speedy response to neighbourhood place problems and needs identified by our residents. Events have had more than £100,000 spent in them to put good events into Washington over the last 2 years. £130,000 in additional enforcement to tackle fly tipping. This is added to city-wide schemes and budgets for additional enforcement and the use of street cameras. Over £250,000 in the last 2 years to help projects that directly help our young people in and around Washington. And in addition, we have some new capital proposals which we are seeking approval for from full council in March 2022, following approval by Cabinet on the 16th of November, being £500,000 in total for a refurbishment of both Washington and Houghton libraries, £200,000 on a refurbishment of the Arts Centre via the Lone Barn, the Granary and Theatre upgrades, and £45,000 to create 90 additional car parking spaces via an overflow car park at the Northern Area Playing Fields, which is now home to the Washington Football Hub and is additionally the access point for the Washington Riding Centre. So, apparently that's it. So obviously I can't agree with the question, and that is not an exclusive list. So I genuinely believe that this myth of Washington gets nothing is clearly exactly that: lies, rumours and misinformation. And I'm delighted to say that this council delivers for Sunderland, Washington and the coalfield, and that our residents can see that, and that we're hearing that from them because they are happy with where they are with us, and that will continue into the local elections, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have gone slightly over the allocated time for these questions.
My apologies, Mr.
Not a problem. I have 3 to go. I'm minded to allow them. I think the public questions are very important. We're okay with that, colleagues? We'll move into supermarkets. Let's have a look. Supermarket in Station Road, Fulwell. From Sandra Boyers, and she's a resident of Sunderland. As a supporter of the campaign to keep a supermarket on Station Road in Fulwell, can the council tell me, has the council received any formal or informal enquiries regarding the potential change of use of the former Sainsbury premises. Is the council encouraging supermarkets to come forward, as the Fulwell councillors are? How much does the freeholders have to pay the council while the building remains unoccupied? And I believe, Councillor Stewart, you're responding to this question.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to Sandra for the question. And I suppose the first point really to make with regards to the issue of the supermarket in Station Road is that I think locally, I think there's generally cross-party support in that locality with regards to the need to have retail maintained there, Mr. Mayor. I mean, certainly from my point of view, I'm aware that not just the local Conservatives, but the Liberal Democrats have raised the issue, and indeed the local Labour Party candidate, Mr. Ian Keir, was the first individual who made the council aware of the concerns of residents. And I think the point I would like to start by saying is referring to the reply that I think Mr. Keir has been given to the community, that the council has this, it's zoned as an area for retail use, and that's quite specific for us, and that it's within the city's plans, and those plans have been approved by everybody here, every elected member. That is the plan of the council. And the plan of the council is that that area of the city should remain as retail. I think the caveat with this is that any decision by the owners of that supermarket may well be subject to a planning application, and that planning application is subject to planning guidance that at best is probably described as flimsy, following the last review by the Conservative government back in July 2021. So any decisions will be based on planning guidance that's been issued by the Conservative government. Having said that, I would state that currently the council's position is that that land there is for retail use. I can confirm that the council has not received any formal inquiries regarding a change of use, and I think that might try and reassure some of the residents. We're not aware of anything that has come forward with regards to a change of use at this present time, as however I have noted that if something does come in, it will be subject to those planning regulations. Officers have made inquiries with both the landlord's agent and Sainsbury's agent with regards to their future intentions for the property. However, we are still awaiting a reply from both. The council is not the landowner, and therefore no rent is payable to the council in respect of this property. The business rates liability for this property is £67,584 per annum, and the owner will be required to pay rates once the 3-month exemption for empty property, which started on the 13th of January 2022, expires. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next question is Nationality and Borders Bill. It's from Pam Wortley, a resident of Sunderland. The Nationality and Borders Bill, currently progressing through Parliament, has been condemned by the UN Refugee Agency. It's been also numerous local authorities and 56 groups and charities across the North East. What assessment has Sunderland City Council made of the impact the bill will have on our communities in our city? And what steps has it taken to oppose these measures? And that will be responded to by Councillor Rowntree.
I would like to thank Pam Wortley for the question. Mr. Mayor, the Nationality and Borders Bill is yet another draconian measure from the Tory government that goes no way to fixing the broken system. Instead, it will actually make matters much worse. We therefore oppose the Nationality and Borders Bill, and we have made our position known to the Home Secretary on this matter.
Thank you. And the last question, introduction of integrated care systems, from Laura Morell. Following remarks from the leader, recent reports in the HSJ How does the Council propose to prevent the NHS succeeding in its attempt at political castration with the proposed power grab excluding politicians from integrated care boards, which means that scrutiny is effectively ignored at the local level? What measures of the Council pursuing to avoid the car crash? The leader envisaged is coming to ensure that the ICS delivers place-based services to residents in Sunderland. And I believe Councillor Checker will respond to that one.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to thank Laura Murrell for the question on this very, very important issue. By way of introduction, subject to the enactment of the draft Health and Care Bill, integrated care systems would be responsible for the planning, commissioning and funding of NHS services from the 1st of July 2022. The North East and North Cumbria ICS will take on the responsibility for the commissioning, spend and performance of NHS services across all 13 places within its patch, including Sunderland. The importance of place and the importance of the partnerships that exist in each place between the Council, NHS and partners is highlighted, as most of the work to integrate care and improve population health happens locally, near to where people live, work and access services. The Council is working with ICS colleagues, CCGs and partners to influence ICS governance and how it will operate within the 13 places to ensure the importance of place and democratic engagement. The new ICS will delegate some of its NHS functions to place-based partnerships. The detail of this is still being worked through, and it is expected that longer-term place-based partnerships would have the scope to seek more developed powers from the ICS. Place-based partnerships will have a pivotal role in the new NHS arrangements, and in readiness for this, we, which is the Council, the CCG and the partners, have been developing our existing partnership to enact the place-based partnerships that we need to work with the ICS in the future. So in response to how we would prevent the ICS from excluding politicians from integrated care boards, in accordance with the bill, our ICS will be made up of two parts, an integrated care board and an integrated care partnership. During this summer and the months of October, November and December 2021, we have joined a series of ICS meetings which included executive leaders from the local authorities in the NHS, CCGs and foundation trusts and across the North East and Cumbria. Sunderland City Council have been involved and participated in the meetings with the ICS and the discussions on the ICB and ICP around size, membership and the ICS's operating model, including what functions and responsibilities it will keep and which ones it would delegate to each of the 13 places. The North East and North Cumbria ICS draft constitution has also been discussed at these meetings. The membership of the ICB and the ICS will be broad and there will be local authority representation. The new partnership arrangements for Sunderland have been developed and agreed by the Council and the CCG. The Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee have reviewed and commented on our new placed-based arrangements, particularly around the role of scrutiny and the Health and Wellbeing Board, and these have been reported to both Cabinet and the CCG governing body. We have ensured that Sunderland's Health and Wellbeing Board will remain within our own governance as a statutory committee of the Council, fulfilling its important role and responsibilities setting the health and wellbeing strategy to improve the health of our residents, address health inequalities and promote integration with our NHS. The Health and Wellbeing Board have received regular updates over the last 12 months to seek assurance on the work to prepare for the changes brought by the draft bill. Regarding the second part of the question about measures to ensure the ICS delivers place-based services to Sunderland residents, the draft legislation would require the ICB to take on the commissioning function of the CCGs. The ICB would then delegate some commissioning functions to place, i.e. Sunderland. The discussions mentioned earlier have supported the development of the proposed approach to delegation, and the Council, with the CCG and partners, have been developing partnership arrangements to enable the ICB to do this, and the role of scrutiny and the Health and Wellbeing Board remain important in ensuring place-based services. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. We now move into questions for Council. The first one is energy bills from Councillor Philtai.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Resolution Foundation currently predicts higher energy bills, stagnant wages and government tax rises will leave households in a cost of living crisis with an annual £1,200 hit to their incomes. Could the leader comment on how, as a council, we have been supporting struggling families and what plans he is considering in the future to support them? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Stewart, I believe you're responding to this.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to thank Councillor Ty for prior notice of the question. We know that many households are currently extremely worried about the cost of living increases, with inflation running at over 5% and set to rise even further. Mr Mayor, we're seeing inflation levels that we haven't seen since we need to go back to the dark days, I would say, of the hyperinflation under Mrs Thatcher, when it was significantly higher than that. I think this is even before we even contemplate the impact of the national insurance changes proposed by the government and the expected tsunami of further significant rises in fuel costs for many from April, when the current energy price cap ends. Mr Mayor, the Resolution Foundation were predicting an average increase per household of costs of £1,200 a year. But I believe that may well have seriously underestimated the impact of the expected energy costs. The reason I say this is that I've been provided by a resident of a real-life example of a couple who currently have a combined gas and electric bill of £89 a month, £1,068 per year. In anticipation of the changes in the price cap in April, they have been reviewing alternatives, and the cheapest they could find was £211 per month, £2,532 a year. Mr Mayor, that is something that an awful lot of us are going to be facing in the coming months, and it's something that this Conservative government needs to take responsibility for, which so far they've failed to do. These changes may affect low-income households most, as they have less capacity to absorb these increases. And let's not forget, it follows on from the ending of other support measures, such as the £20 universal credit uplift, which many residents in this city benefited from. This government should also rightfully be condemned for failing to act to support struggling families, indeed condemned for their deliberate policies that will bring thousands of residents in this city back into fuel poverty. Shame on them, Mr Mayor, for their deliberate actions. So what is the council doing to support those in need? Well, if you remember, Mr Mayor, we did put together a fund to support struggling families in the last budget. £1 million fund that was opposed by the local Conservatives and local Liberal Democrats. And thankfully, it's good to see that we have that fund in place to help and support the residents at this time. The council has a local welfare provision scheme that includes crisis support, mainly with food and fuel, and is currently working with a range of partners, including the VCS agencies and food banks, to provide additional support via an enhanced winter offer until the end of March. The enhanced winter offer uses the council's own funding and the household support fund to provide additional support to more residents and provide help with a range of things, such as the welfare provision scheme could usually support. In addition, the council continues to fund welfare rights services, supporting over 8,740 people from April to December 2021, which includes maximising people's income to help meet rising costs, as well as providing debt management support. The council also funds independent housing advice via shelter and links closely to other advice providers and provision, including those providing energy advice and help with fuel debts. Unfortunately, people's abilities to switch and save money is clearly limited, so therefore there is little households can do at present to limit the energy cost increases. However, information is provided on energy saving and energy efficiency, as well as links to local energy advice services via www.sunderland.gov.uk/reducing energy costs, and this will continue to be updated as things change and develop. In addition, the council's current EcoFlex scheme provides help for low-income homeowners with a range of energy efficiency measures, including free insulation and heavily subsidised boilers. So far, the scheme has directly helped over 160 households, but another 160 or so have benefited from the wider ECO scheme from the council's providers. Mr Mayor, this council will do whatever it can to support struggling families in this city, but the government should be leading the way, and sadly they're not, something they have consistently failed to do. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Tai? Yes? Yeah.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. It was pleasing to hear mention of the VCS there and the work that it is doing within the city, and it's also pleasing to see that the Labour Council is doing what it can to help out the most in need during the current energy crisis. I've been personally dealing with residents who have already had the renewals in for the energy contracts as they come out of contract, and it is absolutely scary to see some of those costs that are being put forward now, and that's without potential rises further coming. And the residents I've spoken to in simple terms are saying they just simply won't be able to pay, and it's as simple as that. And I think we've talked in here frequently before about heat or heat, and I think we've got a storm coming and we absolutely need to take it.
Councillor Tai, can I just remind you, it was a supplementary question.
Yeah, okay.
Very important. I know every member in here will be concerned about their residents.
Yeah, I'll go straight into the question then, Mr Mayor. Apologies. As you know, Mr Mayor, the voluntary sector is at the forefront of running our food banks and activities to support struggling families, but there too we're seeing increases of gas and electric and even trebling of bills. Is there anything being proposed to support our much-needed voluntary sector organisations who are also going to be struggling, some already at serious risk of closure with these proposed bills? Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Stewart.
What I would say, I would agree with Councillor Tai with regards to the voluntary community sector are the bedrock of our communities, and I believe it's crucial for this council to support that sector how and when it can, through whatever it means it can, and we will quite surely continue to do that. But he is right that both the VCS and indeed the SME sector within this city will be facing quite significant energy costs that will affect people's jobs. And I think whatever we can do to help and support, we need to do that as a council. But what I would say is, particularly in relation to the voluntary community sector, is that clearly the council, its partners, particularly Gen 2 and the Sunderland Commissioning Group, have worked together to put together an alliance to help ensure that that sector is focused in delivering the key aspirations of residents within the communities that they serve. And another point I would probably make is in relation to this council's community wealth building strategy, is that part of that is clearly to focus on community organisations and help and support them because they have direct impact more than others. And I think the best example of how the council has probably supported that sector is that in the last financial year, the VCS were successful in contracts, I think it was about 15 to 16 million pounds from this council alone in that sense. So I think we do a lot, but I think there's more we can do, and I think Councillor Tai is right with that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
The next question is Seaburn Tram Shelter from Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can the portfolio holder for Dynamic City please set out the lessons learned by the Council following its review of the decision to convert Seaburn Tram Shelter? Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Doyle, for the question as well. I have to say I find it ironic that everything that's come out over the last few weeks, the first question tonight from the Conservative group, involves a delicatessen that specialises in cheese and wine. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to use that, Councillor Doyle. Members will be aware that the proposals for the tram shelter form part of the Council's wider Coastal Communities Fund Round 5 project when the application was first prepared and submitted. The rental income from the new premises is designed to support the operation of the Seafront Trust, and prior to the Council submitting the funding bid to the Coastal Communities Fund in 2019, a number of briefings were undertaken with councillors
and in particular with North Area elected members and scrutiny committees. Historic England listed the tram shelter if the funding bid was submitted, and the associated grant funding was subsequently awarded to the council. As delivery of the Coastal Communities Fund project progressed, a petition to stop the conversion of the tram shelter was submitted, as members will be aware. I would also like to highlight the strength of feeling that the potential for a sympathetic conversion with an appropriate end user received in parallel as a positive in addition to the seafront. A report was submitted to the council at its meeting in September 21, setting out the work carried out in response to the petition. Taking into account the differences of opinion, it was decided that the best course of action was to let the proposed tenant, Black's Corner, submit an application for listed buildings consent. By doing this, the statutory planning process was then able to consider the proposal in full and progress public consultation through the normal channels. And this was in addition to the meetings I held with Councillor Doyle and the petitioners who were obviously against that. And I have to thank Councillor Doyle for the way those were conducted. I thought they were very productive, and it gave people the opportunity not just to have their say, but also to put forward ideas on the proposal as well before it got to a sort of the planning committee stage. Taking into consideration all those comments received, both for and against, the planning committee made a decision to grant listed building consent by unanimous vote. Ongoing communication and engagement will continue at our fantastic seafront. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Supplementary? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Johnson for what I think was a timeline of events. Perhaps he could tease out the lessons learned as a result of the review that was conducted by the Executive Development Directorate. I also wonder if he could confirm whether he believes the engagement of Cabinet members in particular is important in the wider public consultation process, and outline the way in which he participated in that review as well. Thank you.
Can you respond to those, Kevin?
Yes, no problem, Smith. Thank you. It's, obviously, I mentioned it in the response in terms of the communication we had from the very start and the meetings we held. And I said that at the time, I think this is something we could do within planning before it gets to the actual planning committee stage, when there is feeling amongst the community for and against these proposals that their voices are heard, and those opportunities are adhered to. And as Cabinet member, I was willing to go along and meet with those members of the public as well as the local councillors. And also the proposed tenant also initiated a consultation event to also listen to feedback too. So again, lessons learned, that could be something we could roll out for further planning committee decisions, Mr. Mayor. Yeah.
Thank you. The next one is street lighting and northern power grid from Councillor Fagan.
Thank you. There is an increasing issue across the city with streetlights. They're the responsibility of Northern Power Grid rather than Balfour Beatty, and they're not working for extended periods of time. There is currently no way to hold Northern Power Grid to account, as there is no service level agreement in place between them and the council or Balfour Beatty. Could the council make contact with Northern Power Grid to raise this issue on a citywide basis, discuss expectations and put a service level agreement in place? Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to Councillor Fagan for prior notice of the question. The Council recognises concerns regarding street lighting outages across the city. However, the responsibility for street lighting maintenance rests with Aurora, the Council's PFI street lighting and highway signs delivery partner. Through the contract performance criteria, they are required to ensure that lights are repaired within specified timescales, and this includes for any Northern Power Grid cable faults. Failure to meet the response times results in penalties being applied to their monthly payment. There is therefore a very real incentive for Aurora to engage with Northern Power Grid and pressure them to complete repairs within contracted timescales. Indeed, Northern Power Grid are also required to compensate Aurora for not meeting their own response times. So that again, there's incentive on them to also meet their response times. As there is a contract mechanism in place to deal with Northern Power Grid faults, there is therefore no need for an additional service level agreement. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next one is Climate Change Fund. Councillor Samuels, are you presenting this question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Apologies, I'm going to have to try and read it from the screen because I'm reading this on behalf of Councillor Dodds, who couldn't be here. As we approach the budget setting process for this council for 2022-23, I'm reminded of the disgraceful attempts last year by the Liberal Democrats to remove our annual £1 million climate change fund specifically set aside to help meet our 2030 plans to become carbon neutral. Could the leader comment on how we are proceeding with our carbon reduction commitments and give an assurance that he will continue to resist attempts by climate change deniers of whatever party should they attempt to sabotage our plans again in the coming months? Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe, Councillor Rowntree, you're answering this one.
Thank you, Councillor Samuels, for the question. As you'll be aware, Mr Mayor, I provide regular updates to Council on the progress that Council is making in relation to its low carbon commitments. And today's meeting is no exception to this, with another full update on activity and progress, which I'm sure members will agree is especially significant. In January 2020, the Council endorsed the Sunderland Low Carbon Framework, which was prepared jointly with our 2030 Shadow Board partners and sets out an ambition to be carbon neutral as a city by 2040. Aligned to this, in January 2020, the Council also published its own low carbon action plan, which sets out the ambition to achieve carbon neutrality as a council by 2030, and which will be updated on a regular basis as we move forward. It should be noted that the Council has also recently doubled down on its commitments by renewing its commitment to the now more ambitious UK 100 pledge, which seeks for us to be net zero carbon as a council by 2030. It's therefore necessary for the Council, through its medium-term financial plan, to ensure that sufficient resources are made available for the Council to deliver against our commitments and play our role in tackling the climate emergency. Mr Mayor, climate change is the greatest threat we face. To deal with this requires unparalleled levels of cooperation and action. Unlike the Lib Dems, we recognise our responsibility in this to both the city and the world as a whole. And we are not just playing our part, but leading the way in showing what is possible in carbon reduction. The work we have done so far and continue with shows what is possible with a committed political will.
Thank you. The next question is Rokapia from Councillor S. Johnson.
On the 22nd of December 2021, the Council's Facebook page informed residents that Roker Pier was closed while it was assessed for damage following Storm Arwen. Can the Cabinet Secretary provide an update regarding the outcome of this assessment, the cost of any necessary repairs, and when residents can expect the pier to reopen for public use? Thank you.
Councillor Johnson, are you responding to this one? Sorry, I've gone one forward. Councillor Stewart, you're up again.
I thought there was a bit of a surprise there.
Well, I've got to keep you on your toes.
I thought I got out of answering a question.
Someone's starting to fall asleep. We've got to keep an eye on you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And can I thank Councillor Johnson for prior notice of the question. An inspection of the pier was carried out following Storm Arwen to assess the damage. The inspection identified that sections of the railings had been damaged or lost, meaning the pier had to be closed for safety. A local contractor has been engaged to carry out the necessary repairs, but the posts and rails required are cast iron and are not standard off-the-shelf items. They need to be manufactured to order. Consequently, they are on an extended delivery. We are expecting repairs to be completed, though, by late March. The cost of the repair works is £5,759. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, supplementary.
Can the Cabinet Secretary assure me that the staffing issues that had required the pier to be closed often at short notice before Storm Arwen have now been resolved and won't continue to be a problem when it reopens in late March? Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
I don't have that information at the top of my head. I'll have to provide a written answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Visitors parking permits in CPMS areas from Councillor Airwood.
Currently, if you live in a CPMS area in Sunderland and own a vehicle, you are entitled to a free parking permit. However, if you do not own a vehicle, but, for example, have a family member who regularly gives you lifts, maybe does your shopping, you must pay for a visitor pass. It doesn't seem right that this council privileges car owners in this way and penalises residents, many of them elderly or with disabilities, who rely on carers, friends and family. Will the leader commit to introducing a free visitor permit for residents of carless households who request one? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and also thanks to Councillor Wood for the question. In general, residents within a community park and management scheme area can apply for a visitor's permit if they wish to do so at a cost of £40 per annum. However, there are other options available to residents who have or don't have a vehicle and have carers visiting them or family who are caring for their relatives. First is the blue badge holders who are residents within the CPMS area may apply for a visitor's permit, which will be issued free of charge. Blue badge holders are able to park in any area provided they abide by the rules of the National Blue Badge Holder Scheme. Blue badge holders who are residents within the CPMS area may apply for a registration-specific vehicle permit free of charge, but please note this permit will be issued to the badge holder's vehicle and replaces the need to display their blue badge when parking within the scheme during the restricted hours. And also non-blue badge holder residents who require regular long-term care may apply for a visitor's permit, which will be issued free of charge, providing supporting evidence is provided, for example, confirmation from a doctor, consultant nurse or a care and support organisation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next one is Sunderland School Meal Service from Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, can the leader tell us about the awards Sunderland School Meal Service has won in the last 12 months and how these link to a healthier diet for our school children? Thank you.
Councillor Farthing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Fletcher for the question. We are extremely proud to announce that over the last 12 months, our Schools Meal Service has become the first local authority caterer in the country to achieve both the Food for Life Served Here and Green Kitchen Standard Awards for the schools they supply. The Food for Life Served Here Award, which was developed by the Soil Association, provides assurance to schools and parents that the food being served is healthy, fresh, tasty, seasonal and sustainable. In practice, this means implementing a range of menu developments that ensure a positive impact on children's health and well-being, including at least 75% of dishes freshly prepared from unprocessed ingredients, farm-assured meat, seasonal menus, and 100% of fresh produce from local suppliers. The Green Kitchen Standard is a national award scheme developed by the Solar Association and Carbon Trust to recognise caterers that are taking positive steps to sustainably manage energy, water and waste. To achieve the Green Kitchen Standard, the team has implemented some significant whole service changes, such as training and development for school cooks and investment in new equipment, whilst also focusing on everyday changes in kitchen practice across 63 school sites, such as switch-on-off policies, energy-efficient cooking processes, and monitoring and measuring food waste, as well as the positive health and environmental impacts that achieving the Food for Life Served Here Award and Green Kitchen Standard has on our children and schools. It is worth noting that the broader impact these awards can have in that the school meal service employs in the region of 300 local people in the form of school cooks who take away what they learn from their school kitchen back to their homes and communities. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Road layout on St Mary's Way, Councillor L. Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the Deputy Leader confirm that the road layout on St Mary's Way is currently not suitable for some with disabilities and set out a timetable for when it will be?
Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I thank Councillor Reid for the question. I can confirm that St Mary's Boulevard was designed to the appropriate highway design and access standards. It has been subject to extensive consultations, including with statutory consultees and disability groups, as well as independent scrutiny before, during and after construction, in line with the standard road safety audit process. I would add, Mr Mayor, that officers will be more than happy to meet with Councillor Reid to discuss any specific concerns he may have if he so wishes.
Thank you. Next question, and the last one, inflation and City Hall, from Councillor Edgeworth.
Given that inflation's at the highest it has been for years, can the leader tell us how much is expected to be budgeted for to cover the first year's inflationary increase on the already eye-watering £2,443,200 annual rental payment made to Legal and General, who, as the sign outside tells us, funded and own City Hall? Thank you.
Oh, well, I've lost my space. Who is it?
Councillor Stewart.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and can I thank Councillor Edgeworth for providing us of the question. The initial annual rental charge was set based on internal and external professional advice sought as part of the contract negotiation, and to ensure that the whole scheme is value for money and in line with market conditions for the quality of the building that we are now based in. I would also like to remind the Chamber that this is the total rental charge, some of which will be paid by our tenants, including Gen 2, the DWP and the College. My understanding is that it will be anticipated that the final payment that this council will be subject to, once our partner is in place, will be closer to around £1.5 million, Mr Mayor. In terms of the indexation of the rent, an annual increase is applied each year, but the lease terms agreed have a cap and collar mechanism which limits the council's exposure to variations in inflation. The rent will be indexed each year based on the Retail Price Index, or RPI. This will be applied on the anniversary of the lease. The first increase will apply in November 2022 based on the RPI position in August this year. As was set out in the Cabinet report and business case at the time, the Council negotiated a cap and collar mechanism that provides certainty within a range of 1 to 4%. Legal and General will bear the uncertainty of variations outside of that range. In terms of budgeting for next year, the medium-term financial plan report coming to Cabinet next month and Council in March builds in inflationary pressures based upon the best available information. And I would just like to finish off, Mr Mayor, by reminding everybody, and I think we'll have some new councillors here, is that when we were looking for options in relation to new building or remaining at the old Civic Centre, what we're in now was the cheapest option. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the answer. We know the administration's keen on mortgaging the city to the hilt at the moment, and I just wondered what provision has been put in place for inflation on other developments at the moment, and how that's going to affect budgets and services. Thank you.
Can you, sorry, Councillor Stewart is saying he didn't understand or hear what you said. Would you repeat that, please?
Apologies. There's lots of other developments going on in the city at the moment. What impact has the council made about the impact of rising inflation rates on other developments, not just City Hall?
That's a very general question about pretty much any development that's taking place. What I would say is that we have a fine set of officers in this city that ensure that protections are put in contracts, such as the one that's just been referenced. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. We now move on to the report of the Cabinet. I now call upon the Leader to move the approval and adoption of the report of the Cabinet. Leader.
I so move the Cabinet report, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Leader, do you second the report?
I second the report, Mr Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Leader, would you like to speak to the Cabinet report?
This is one way, Mr Mayor, of getting my steps up. And it's not that I don't need them. But no, the report is fully laid out, and I'll leave it there and see if there's anything that I need to respond to, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I understand Councillor Mullen wishes to speak on item 1, the City Plan, and item 4, the report of the Independent Remuneration Panel. If anyone else wishes to speak, can you please raise your hand, identify the number on the Cabinet report, and state whether you have an amendment, a comment, or a question.
Councillor Hodson.
Comment on item 4. Councillor Mullen. There's no more, is there? Councillor Mullen.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. First of all, in relation to item 1, the City Plan, I offer broad support on behalf of my group to an ambitious city plan which Conservative councillors have scrutinised and helped to shape through Scrutiny Coordinating Committee and the City Plan Workshop. And this influence is seen, for example, in the request for more concrete milestones to be included in respect of the Council's carbon neutral targets, as requested by Councillor Mann. The interactive nature of the plan, as has been proposed once it goes digital, and the potential to make revisions and updates will be useful in allowing us to ensure that these promises are delivered on time and in line with expectations. And it's worth pointing out that at this stage it is just a plan, and that the process of continued scrutiny, which we'll all participate in, should be ongoing throughout its implementation to ensure that it becomes a successful reality. Finally, as part of that interactive timeline, I wish to request that each capital project or initiative contains information about sources of funding so that each tab clearly labels whether it's government-funded, private sector investment or otherwise, and offers transparency as far as is possible about where money is coming from and, where necessary, what the terms of investment are. In relation to item 4, the Independent Remuneration Panel, I think has already been publicly advertised. My group opposes the planned 2% increase in the basic allowance and continues to stand by our proposals to cut special responsibility allowances as outlined to the panel for the last 2 years and in our last budget amendment. Councillors in my group who, for the first time this year, have received some of the special responsibility allowances that we said we would cut, stand by those commitments that we made and therefore donate their special responsibility allowances to charities. For example, we said we would cut the special responsibility allowance of all of the vice chairs of area committees by 100%, and so accordingly, Councillor Michael Dixon gives 100% of his special responsibility allowance for being the vice chair of the East area to charity. And it's my understanding that Councillor Haswell, as the vice chair of West area, does that as well. Coming on to some of the specifics of this report, I'd like the leader to offer more clarity about his plans for a new green portfolio, including whether this new post will take over the environmental services brief from the deputy leader and whether its creation will lead to a new environmental scrutiny committee, which my group has previously requested, and the need for which has been compounded by the volume of environmental services focused questions, particularly at the Scrutiny Coordinating Committee. However, I do also have questions about why this proposal has emerged at all. The leader has been unable to fill 2 current vacancies in his cabinet, and the account that he gave to other group leaders a few months ago was that there was not enough work within the council to do to justify filling these posts. When I repeated this claim to the Independent Remuneration Panel, they had not been informed of this and didn't know that there wasn't sufficient work for 2 vacant cabinet positions. And colleagues will be aware that the panel bases the rate of allowances that it sets on its understanding of the workload associated with each post. That is to say, they assign an allowance to these 2 vacancies on the understanding that there was work for them to do, but it transpired there isn't. Clearly, the fact that they were unaware that remunerated cabinet posts have no assigned work to them has wider implications for how SRAs are assigned across the board. If, as the leader said, there doesn't exist a large enough workload to fill these current vacancies, then why is he creating a new one at cabinet level rather than, for example, finding ways to incorporate the green agenda into what is, by his own admission, an underworked dynamic city team? Finally, I wish to attribute the comments in the report regarding the politicisation of the panel last year to myself. This related specifically to the concerns that I raised about the Labour group's deceitful tactics last year when the Independent Remuneration Panel report showed that they had asked for an increase in the basic allowance, but then told the public that they were against the increase that they had lobbied for. The panel verbally confirmed this as well. We didn't get a direct answer last year, and so I raised this with the panel ahead of this year's report. My view is that for full transparency and clarity about who said what, all submissions in future should be named, and in accordance with that view, I've published my group's full submission in full on the Sunderland Conservatives website. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor Sunderland. I'd just like to pick up on one aspect of the Independent Remuneration Panel report, which has been raised a few times. To my group's frustration, though, hasn't been addressed by either the panel or the Cabinet when bringing forward proposals. That's broadband and home telephone allowances. Now, as it stands, the expenses options for councillors allow councillors to claim for home broadband and telephone lines. However, all councillors are also able to get a mobile telephone, which of course provides a phone line, with a data connection, which of course provides internet. Now, our concern about this is, one, at best, it's anachronistic that we're still providing landline telephones. We have this new building, funded and owned by Legal & General, which, broadly speaking, we're avoiding putting landlines in. Council officers are moving towards using mobiles only. I think councillors ought to be doing the same. At best, as I say, it's anachronistic. At worst, it leads to double dipping, which is not something we want to see happening. So I hope that all councillors will look at removing that policy and that option from the expenses package in future. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Leader, do you wish to speak? Right. Leader, do you wish to exercise your right of reply?
Mr. Mayor, and I thank Councillors Mullen and Hodgson for their comments. They are entitled to their view, and as leaders of their respective groups, they have their positions to uphold with the posturing that starts about now regarding local elections in May. And we've been here before, and I'm sure we'll be here again. I do thank Councillor Mullen for the broad support about the city plan, because the city plan is a living document. I genuinely want councillors to feel, and certainly the Labour group want this, and that if there are issues with items on the city plan, we can change them. There's no point having a city plan, and it has held us back in decades gone by where we've had plans and they've just stopped us doing things because the plans haven't moved with the times. Now, the city plan is definitely moving with the times, and that includes engagement with scrutiny. And I would like to think that if there are any issues regarding timelines and benchmarks not being achieved. We'll get to hear about that through scrutiny in the usual way, and that will then enable a conversation to occur at Cabinet with Chief Officer Group and the Chief Executive. On item 4, which is, surprise, surprise, the independent remuneration panel's notifications and recommendations. It is an independent remuneration panel. They ask the questions, they say at the timelines, they come out with what they think is a fair set of allowance payments as basic and as SRAs. It was absolutely clear to the Labour group that we could not be taking even a 2% rise when we were still putting council taxes up because of the massive underfunding of budgets by a Conservative government that just continues year on year with austerity politics. So that was why we said no to it. The independent panel have done their job. They last year proposed that we uplift to £9,000 because that was the median level of a basic allowance in the North East and with local authorities of our size. Sunderland Council's basic allowance by comparison is very difficulties a year ago, and they're still suffering with financial difficulties this year, and that's going to get worse because of a national insurance rise unless the Tory party bottles it, having listened to Labour, and withdraws it before we get to April. They actually do something about VAT on fuel bills, which would help families. They look at the freeze on universal credit, which is actually a real cut in income for families, at least 40% of whom are working. So with that background, it just was not possible to take even a 2% rise. I think the question regarding we've got 2 vacancies at Deputy Cabinet Member is that because we've been looking at where we're going as a city plan, as we've already mentioned, is a living document, well, so's how we do the politics within the council. The reason for me looking to bring in a new cabinet position for the green agenda area, and I've not finished the work on that yet, but that's highly likely to happen for May, is because of the 2030 carbon neutral target that as a council we've set ourselves working with partners. That isn't a portfolio by itself at the moment, and there is a great deal of work to be done in that area, so we need that to happen. And I do believe, to be honest, that it was Councillor McDonough several months ago that suggested it in a council meeting that might be something we need to look at. If I've got your name wrong, Councillor McDonough, I apologise, but definitely somebody within the Conservative group mentioned it in a meeting, and I thought that was quite a good idea, and I've looked at it to see where we go with it. Regarding cabinet deputies, and we're running with 2 vacancies at the moment, surely it would be worse if I'd just put people in there to fill them, to give allowances out, as you lot always suggest we do. I won't put people into positions if there's no need, and we might cut those altogether in May. Because, as I've said, the structure of how we do these allowances needs to change every other year probably, because it's the nature of life. The broadband and telephone lines issue is desperation from the Liberal Democrats again. They've had their fun with the expenses. They're back on expenses because they've got nothing to say, because they're delivering nothing. They don't come forward with any positivity. They constantly vote against everything this council comes forward. At least with the Conservative group, they're constructive. And yes, you disagree with us, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm fine with that, because that's politics and that's grown-ups. The Liberal Democrats, let's look at the 143 quid a year that will save us, or whatever it is, by banging on about this. But I would say, under the COVID crisis that we've had for the last 2 years, if some of us hadn't had broadband and telephone lines in our houses, we wouldn't have been able to engage as councillors because we weren't here. So having broadband and telephone allowances, because we need sometimes to have broadband and telephones, and not just smartphones and not just iPads or laptops or desktops or whatever, is still a necessary facet of being a councillor, I believe, and being a good community champion, because you need to have all the tools to be the best community worker that you can be for your residents. So that's my comments on what's been said by Councillor Mullen and Councillor Hodgson, Mr Mayor, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Do we accept the report of Cabinet? We've gone a few minutes over the time that this council agreed that we would finish at 7, but we do have 2 reports. Number 14 is an important report and could actually refer to any member of this council at any time. So I intend to close the meeting after item 14, and any other business will have to be dealt with as we go along for the future. But the next report is action on petitions. Do any members wish to comment on the report? Can we agree the report? Sorry.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Mann wishes to speak.
Councillor Mann. Your pies will be getting warm.
Behave. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a comment from the petition group on the shipyard petition. It's not expected, the response, but of course they're very disappointed. We know about the ownership of the land, but the group are saying that they would like to engage with council, and hopefully they're talking about the process to do a compulsory purchase order. They would like to sit down, not speaking to the Port Authority, but speaking to the leader of this council and speaking to the CEO, just to sit down and talk about it, to see if there's any way that they can have backing from the council. The people of Sunderland that are in the group and petitioned are feeling very disappointed. So is there a chance that they can be spoken to again? Thank you.
Thank you. The next item reports, which includes a report of the leader on special urgency decisions and a report seeking approval for absence from meetings. We'll take these in turn, starting with the leader's report on special urgency decisions. The second report. Thank you. Does Council agree to receive the report? Councillor McKnight, do you need to leave for this last item? Next, we will deal with report seeking approval for absence from meetings. Leader, would you please move the report?
I so move the report, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Leader, do you second the report? Leader, do you wish to speak to the report?
No, Mr Mayor, it's still laid out.
Thank you. Is the report agreed?
Agreed.
Councillor Mullen?
Just a very brief technicality, Mr Mayor. I'm sure Councillor McKnight outside will pass on our best wishes to the other Councillor McKnight, but I wonder if the leader might make provision to make Councillor Diane Snowden the permanent chair of Scrutiny Coordinating Committee, given the circumstances. It's a job she's doing already, and I think it would be beneficial if she became the full-time chair.
Do you want to comment on that, Leader?
Councillor Mullen, it may surprise you, but that's not a job I can give. It's in the scrutiny chair's positions are in the hands of the Labour group members without the executive being in that meeting. So whilst I fully understand the point you're making, Tony, currently, and it's the way it's always worked, Diane, I'm sure, will happily continue to chair the meetings because Doris is very unwell and we're very shortly at the end of the council year, but I cannot do that because it's not within my gift. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. It hasn't been easy. It's new surroundings, but I'm sure you'll appreciate how nice the building is. Have a safe journey home, and concludes the meeting.